Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Jen Ritchie. I'm the founder of the Cause Marketing Summit. Welcome back, many of you. I know you were here on Tuesday. We had a wonderful day together sharing. And obviously, this year has been very difficult for many, many people, especially those in philanthropy and those working on causes related to COVID-19. So I welcome you here. I'm really excited to do this in a virtual setting for the very first time. Ordinarily, we're meeting in Lower Manhattan and networking and getting together. And at the end of the day, we're cheersing and having drinks, and it's a wonderful way to connect and meet your peers. But I'm grateful that we've been able to create this online community and have it be a very more interactive experience. As you can see, you have the ability to show your video, which you can at any point. At one point, we will allow you to unmute when we break out into breakout sessions a little later this afternoon. So just be aware of that. But first and foremost, we have our wonderful sponsor. As you know, Oberlin has supported the Cause Marketing Summit for a number of years, and the managing partner, Drew Train there, who has racked up dozens of awards in cause-related marketing, both nationally and internationally. And he has started a purpose-driven agency with his partner, Bill Oberlander. And he's here to talk today about the study. There's some of the research they've done around there is no normal, only new, and how brands are getting more involved and getting called to do more activism. So I'm going to toss over controls to you, Drew, and take it away. I think you have to, you just have to unmute quickly.
Unmute myself first, right? Classic. First day on Zoom. No, I'm kidding. So thanks for the introduction and everybody. Thank you for coming and for supporting Cause Marketing Summit. This is something that Oberlin has been a part of for years. And, I always enjoy speaking to this group. And I think that the programming that Jen puts forward is fantastic. And I would encourage you to come back next year. Hopefully we'll get to see each other in person. But we'll see how that goes, because as we all know, we're in a very different state right now. So shortly after we went into lockdown, Oberland is a purpose-driven ad agency based in Manhattan. So we went on lockdown March 13th, where we closed our office and we moved and went remote 100%. And one of the things that we did was start to field research about how the virus was and the pandemic was changing consumer behavior and creating opportunities. And so we started a research series called There Is No Normal, Only New, where we did a sequence of surveys to 1,000 Americans 18 to 65 using a research tool called Suzy, which is a great tool to very quickly discover lots of different insights from a panel of a couple of million Americans. For nonprofits out there who are looking to have a research tool that you can use at a low cost, and that's quite powerful. I strongly recommend it. It's suzy.com. Definitely well priced and powerful. So now that I've got the plugs out of the way, I'd also like to thank The Guardian, who's not only an Oberland client, but also partnered with us to publish the first round of this research. We did 4 separate surveys. The first survey was on how people were responding to the crisis, and in a way also how it was affecting people's mental health. The second survey was about how it affected the food sector as an industry. The third was about was after the Black Lives Matter activism that reignited in June, and after the murders that the country witnessed in the early part of June and late May. We fielded a survey about that, and then recently we fielded 2 other surveys about mental illness and about medical technology and how people are adjusting to home health care in the virus. So I'm going to share some data with you on some of our key findings and what the implications are. So hopefully you're seeing the screen here. So first and foremost, probably not surprising, but 83% of Americans admitted to feeling stressed and overwhelmed, and a degree of increased anxiety and mental health pressure than they had felt prior to the virus. that's probably not surprising. What's surprising to people who know mental health is that 83% of people would admit to it. That is a radical change in the face of what has been a stigma associated with the condition and a variety of mental illnesses where people would never kind of admit to something like this. But I think because of the universality of the pandemic, it kind of cut through a lot of that. What's interesting, numbers that kind of fell under this was that about 60% of people reported seeking help from a friend or colleague or mental health professional. But one of the that was a number that came out in May, was that 60% had sought help. And we followed up and asked in the survey, we haven't published this yet, but we found how many people found the resources they were looking for. And we found that 80% of white people found the resources they were looking for, and only about 40% of Black, Indigenous, or people of color found the resources they were looking for. So what's probably not surprising is that there's an access gap in communities of color to mental health care. But for organizations who are, looking to make new partnerships, around Black Lives Matter activism and trying to reach out to communities of color, mental health, policing, and these issues are very interconnected, and is something that you're going to be hearing more and more about as we start to get into late September and October, as mental health awareness activity picks up again. Changing topics a little bit. So this is, again, probably not a surprising 6 months out, but 50% of consumers have changed brands for some or all of their needs. There's been a massive switch, particularly at the beginning of the pandemic, when availability of a lot of household brands was an issue. And what we found is that most people have stuck with the new brand. So whether it's dog food or paper towels or coffee or what have you, the grocery store brands, the CPG brands who lost customers may have lost them for a while. And it may take a while for shopping habits and consumption habits to come back. And I think what that can mean for nonprofits or causes or brand partnerships is an opportunity to realign and, frankly, reapproach either old leads or old partners as their demographics may have changed and as your demographics may have changed. There's a lot of opportunity for new alignments, because one of the sister numbers to this statistic is about 3 times more men are grocery shopping now and cooking for their households. So, the virus did change the way that people interact at home, and it means a lot more different customers in the grocery store, frankly. Your register roundup programs now have a new audience and a new profile to target. Your causes that target men now have much broader appeal in the grocery store and in other retail environments. And I think, generally speaking, from a social perspective, the idea that men are getting a better sense of what some domestic life is like, I think, is just probably good and eye-opening for a lot of people, myself included. That opens up opportunities for all different kinds of things, and probably conversations that men and women have been having in homes for years, where men have been a little deaf and are now probably realizing the importance of. And I think that creates a tremendous opportunity to reach out and engage different brands and different consumers in different ways, as you have a very different customer set now in the grocery store. Also, with the idea of food preparation, we're seeing a lot more men take an active role in wellness and healthcare. That's some of the med tech stuff that we're coming out with in a week or two. Actually, I think October 5th is our next publishing day, where we're starting to see men get a lot more involved in healthcare and family health as well, which is again an opportunity for brands to find new partners. Interesting, coming out of the Black Lives Matter movement, we found 42. This is, I thought, an interesting statistic. So 42% of people are doing something to combat systemic racism for the first time. So that's a pretty big number. I am encouraged because, I think about what the gap is. Okay, so 42% are now active and involved in the movement for the first time. My assumption is that more than 8% of the balance was already doing something or had some civic involvement in the past, and that we're probably now past a tipping point where more than half the country acknowledges systemic racism and is actively involved in doing something to dismantle it, which is critical. I mean, obviously, I think most of us on the call are probably aware of the unfortunate decision yesterday in Kentucky around Breonna Taylor, and I think that you're gonna continue to see this. The election obviously has race all throughout it, and I think that brands and nonprofits need to make their voice heard on this issue. And one of the powerful statistics we have to back that up, sorry, wrong order, is that 35% of consumers under 26 have stopped shopping with a brand who said nothing at all about the crisis. And I think that's a very, very, very seismic shift in the importance of this issue and the expectation consumers have that silence about this and frankly lots of other issues is just no longer a position, and that you have to choose. I think the divisiveness that's pervasive kind of right now is feeding into this, but never in the past were brands stung for sitting on the sidelines, and now they are. And again, that's I think a compelling statistic for you to use to take to brands and engage them on issues of systemic racism, however that relates to your cause, whether it's mental health or right now Oberland's helping the March of Dimes, right, where birth equity is a huge issue. There's race baked into every cause at some level, pretty much, and this is a powerful stat to take to a brand leader. The other thing that I find really interesting is that 91% of people we surveyed believe their actions and their actions and the actions of brands will actually make a difference this time. So that's a lot of optimism. This survey was taken in the middle of July, so it's kind of at the height of some of the protests. But it also leaves us vulnerable as you consider what happens if it fails and we don't get change, and we see moments like last night or yesterday afternoon in Kentucky. What is that going to mean, and what is that going to do to a new generation of consumers and to the general movement that I think we're all trying to build towards a more purposeful economy when a lot of people get disappointed? And I think it's incumbent on all of us to do what we can to make sure we live up to the ideals that we set out with. And so that was just, a quick top line, 15 minutes of key findings. I don't know if Jen, you can do this, but I'd love to open it up if anyone wants to ask any questions, or you can post them in the chat and I will figure out how to read them momentarily.
Thank you so much, Drew. That was great. If anyone has any questions, I'd love if you could drop them into the chat right now. Drew, I'd love to ask you a little bit about, because I know you didn't have much time to go into it, but your work with building a mental health coalition and with the work that you're doing there. I know that that's something you're very passionate about and something that you've brought to the summit floor before with your partnership with NAMI.
Sure. So there's two things kind of going on there. One is the Mental Health Coalition, which was started by Kenneth Cole and Pamela Bell, and grew out of the fashion space with partnerships with NAMI and the National Suicide Prevention Line and Child Mind Institute, the Getch Foundation, a number of others that I couldn't possibly name. But that was an interesting coalition where Kenneth kind of took it upon himself to serve as the gravitational force to pull together all these brands and nonprofits in the space and leverage a campaign called How Are You Really, which was a simple kind of social media anti-stigma campaign that came out in the middle of May during the COVID crisis, where he just kind of stopped to ask that question to people, because that's something that we, how are you is something that you hear 500-600 times a week, and the answer is fine, I'm whatever, and it's all almost a formality. You don't really kind of stop to think.
Good.
And
I
so,
think up until now, everything has, it's been normal to say, I'm good. How are you? How about you?
yeah,
When
and
the realistic answer is no one's saying, everyone's like pausing and saying, well, as good as can be expected.
right, but it forces people to take a moment to stop and think. And so he got everyone, all the leaders of the organization and a number of his celebrity. He did a great job leading a celebrity outreach to Justin Bieber and Kendall Jenner and the Kardashians, and Governor Cuomo, actually mentioned the campaign in one of his briefings. It was great. My mother actually saw the blue PowerPoint slide with the with the web on it, with the website on it, and she flipped. Was a nice personal moment for me. But he did a good job of bringing that campaign together in the moment with a very simple question and answer format that worked great with social media. There was no paid media spend at all. It was all influencer driven, zero cost, frankly, that went into it. And, it's not something that's easily replicable, because not everybody, has a Kenneth Cole in their back pocket. But it does go to show you that when people do get involved, you can go a long way. And NAMI, the National Alliance for Mental Illness, was a big part of that. Katrina Gay, who's spoken here before, was instrumental in taking that mission to corporations and getting Starbucks and Amex and American Airlines. And again, I'm going to do an injustice to Katrina and not mention probably more than half the brands, HBO and Showtime. I mean, she's a force in the sponsorship and partnership space. And she got them all aligned to promote this and participate in it, and, in one form or another, and have a how are you really day in their office, or in their virtual office, as the case was. So that was a really wonderful campaign. And what we're trying to do now, actually, I also am on the board of NAMI's New York City affiliate. And one of the things that we're trying to do is we surveyed people on mental health, the intersection between mental health and policing, and emergency response, and who should be, responding to police calls for 911 for people with mental health crisis, and what types of alternative treatments should be out there. And we started to find some really compelling public support for a number of alternative crisis interventions, which we're hoping to advocate for coming soon. I'm trying not to get ahead of the organization and what we want to do, but there's some, we did surveys in New York, we did surveys at a national level. We did surveys about people's experience in the emergency rooms, people with mental illness and their family members. And there's just a ton of learning that can be had about the need to expand capacity, the need for an alternative to 911, the need for non-police resources to be responding to the crisis. Generally people feel there's a role for police in certain situations, but that they shouldn't really ever be alone on a mental health call, and that there should be some form of, mental health professional or crisis intervention expert that's not part of the police force, that's part of the response.
We just have a couple questions come in. I want to make sure
Oh,
that.
sorry. I can't see the chat for some reason. Can you?
Oh, no, it's fine. So from Lisa Buxbaum, she wanted to know, she said, thank you for your insightful presentation. How do you see companies wrapping themselves in whitewashing for causes versus companies really getting behind the issues?
I think it's the same kind of mixed bag that you always get. But what I think is there's more of it. And I generally think that's a good thing. And, while I'm not a big fan of corporate whitewashing of things, I think to some extent the fake it till you make it crowd helps raise the boat for everybody else. And, I think it's most visible around probably Pride, where just about everybody is doing that. And I feel like almost the LGBTQ community, I was reading posts and articles last year that was like, enough of this, like you're overdoing it. And I don't mean mean to speak for the community, but there was a reaction to the amount and the extent of, I think, pandering that happened in a lot of ways. And, it's annoying, but
Yeah.
overall, I think it's the sign of a rising tide. And, I come from ad agency world, so I liken purpose and cause marketing to the rise of digital marketing. And there were a whole lot of fakers in the beginning. There were a whole lot of big companies who said they could be digital and tried to do digital things and all that kind of good stuff. And they were not good at it for a while, but eventually they learned. And I think that it's important to, um, I have written a couple articles of progress over purity and forgiveness uh, are really important in the process, and that we need to give brands the space to screw it up without punishing them too hard so that they keep at it. You don't want to drive them away. And so, like, I look at corporate sponsorship programs or cause programs or, the Pepsi and Kendall Jenner ad or Gillette, and like, there's brands that they're trying,
Sure.
and it's important to recognize and encourage that. And it's like learning a new sport or learning a new discipline, right? The first website that I built, I would probably be ashamed of if I went and looked at it right now. And I bet many of you have had, if you look back, or if you were building websites in 2005, eek. And I think you got to kind of let people learn. So
Are there any, and this is another question that came up from Jen Johnson, are there any companies that you think are doing a good job in this space?
Yeah, I think that the companies um, that are kind of well known for it, right? REI and Patagonia and Ben and Jerry's have all been pretty good. I think I think it was Patagonia that just did the Vote the Assholes Out initiative, which I thought was pretty clever, where they sewed that into the tags of their jackets and clothes. Genius. So I think that's pretty stellar. One of the brands that I'm proud of, I'm going to do a little self-promotion, but Acessa is one of Oberland's clients. It's an alternative procedure to hysterectomy for women who have fibroids, which is it's a lot of women, and it's a tremendous alternative. You can still get pregnant. It's a great product, but it's an elective procedure, and it was all canceled during COVID. And so Acessa teamed up with Honey Pot, which is a feminine hygiene products brand, and wound up getting gift baskets of Honey Pot products donated to the women whose surgeries were delayed, which is predominantly women of color, as this affects African-American women more than anybody else, almost 3 times the rate. So doing that kind of right at the moment where the Black Lives Matter kind of activity was intersecting with COVID was, I think, a really good response for 2 corporate brands to get together and do something, even without a cause necessarily involved. So I was encouraged to see that. So I think, your partners or your usual suspects are the ones kind of leading the way again. But the fact that you're seeing, most brands put out a statement about Black Lives Matter. And I think that that's at least a step in the right direction, even if they didn't mention the murders or mention white supremacy or systemic racism by name. Again, not everyone's going to be a market leader. Not everyone's going to be kind of leading edge. And I think the fact that you're getting people to just acknowledge it now is a sign of tremendous progress.
Absolutely. And yeah, that was terrible news yesterday, but my close friend and colleague, Joel Berg, the ED of Hunger Free America, said, there are no permanent defeats and there are no, permanent wins, especially when it comes to an issue this massive. And so obviously we all have to keep going and keep pushing. I know during this whole pandemic, I've been working with an agency called Help Good and the Lawyers Committee under Civil Rights, who works on anti-hate and voter suppression. And even though, they've been working on this since 1969, they're still working, we're still making progress. And even though it feels slow, it's something that we have to keep going and keep forging ahead with. I know that your presentation at last year's summit, it was interesting because you drew to a presentation about nothing changes unless if we don't, if the agency world, if media, if representation doesn't change, then nothing's going to change. And so, and some of the people gave me feedback, like, how is that related to cause marketing? And to me, it was just such a no-brainer that representation and diversity and inclusion and in media is so intertwined. And so it didn't dawn on me to make the connection for folks, but you've been doing this work for a really long time, and I commend you for it. And I'm so happy that you're out there doing it. I think we have maybe one more question.
Yeah, there was a thing in the survey, and all this data from this deck is public. I'll give a copy of it to Jen. You guys can use it for anything. And you can find on our blog here, there's the full studies with all the other data that's not included here, which is open source and available to you as well.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, there was a question about if we can use this in presentation. So we will make this available to everyone for download, both in the Slack and then in communications following up to this summit. Also keep in mind, we will be giving out a PDF of everyone's contact information. So if you do have questions directly for Drew, we will be sharing his info along with all the attendees who agreed to share their info. So thank you, Drew. Thank you for your support. Hopefully I'll get to see you in person again soon, and hope you have a great rest of the day.
Thanks.
And show it, but let me introduce this power dynamic duo. So Carrie Pendoli comes from Rodan and Fields, and she has so much experience both on the nonprofit and for-profit side. It's been a delight to hear from you and how you've built Rodan and Fields program from the ground up. Carrie Pena works with Bolden. She has partnered with Carrie Pendoli for over 6 years now, and they've shaped their partnership into being a really, really fruitful for both sides partnership. And they have done some major pivoting in 2020. So they're here to share a little bit about their partnership prior and how they've been able to shift and move together in this sort of new space that we're in. So I'll let you take it away. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yay. We were going to talk a little bit about our program that we co-designed, and the video is kind of helpful for the context of the conversation. So Jen, if you can share that first, I think that'll kind of set the stage for folks.
Okay, 1 second. Let me just share my screen to make sure I have it up.
When we first heard about 36-hour immersion in this experience, I knew it was going to be a lot of work. And I also knew some amazing partners who help support Build Up financially coming to visit our schools and meet with our students and learn about the Bronx. But I have to be honest, I didn't expect the connection that I saw.
It really changed my perspective on judging a book by its cover.
There was a genuine love and strong sense of openness from both the kids and the partners.
What the program with the 36 hours does is it gets deep quick. You talk about hard issues. You talk about the things that they have faced and how they've handled it with such bravery and resiliency.
These kids are the change right now in their community. They are a collective, powerful force. Lawrence is an incredible leader. Everything should tell him to be hard, and he makes a choice to be selfless and to be giving.
I would describe Cindy as being a really powerful girl.
He brings a lot of joy to other people around him.
Millie has such an incredible bright light.
I'm just very thankful that you guys even came and be a part of what we do and kind of see you for who we are.
To me, y'all were all my family. The way y'all cared for me, y'all supported me.
You're like a huge part of me.
She's stuck with me now.
It makes me feel happy that somebody I don't know just sees who I really am.
I can't wait to see all the great things that you do in life.
Thank you.
You hear these stories, you see these students around the country making a difference. And you ask yourself, how can you be part of the movement and not just a charity? You can share, serve, and support.
Carrie, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, totally. So just a really quick reintroduction and orientation into who we are. So I'm Carrie Pena. I'm the Chief Experience Officer for Build On, as Jennifer said. Build On's mission is to break the cycle of poverty, illiteracy, and low expectations through service and education. And what we do is we run service learning programs in under-resourced communities across the United States, and we build schools in developing countries. And we've been partnering with Rodan and Builds for 6 years. And Carrie, I'll turn it over to you to introduce yourself really quickly, and then I've got a question for you.
All right. Yeah, as Jen mentioned, I'm Carrie Hayden Pendoli. I've been at Rodan and Fields for 7 years. And when I joined 7 years ago, in part of a strategic redesign process, I found Build On and just kind of fell in love with what they're doing. And we'll kind of dive into the empathy building and agency building and sort of like the shining the light on the students as like strong, resilient individuals was like just super, super important as we found new partnerships. And the program that you saw, we designed 5 years ago. And it just has so many really amazing layers that just treats volunteering in a very different way. In addition to running the foundation for Rodan and Fields, I also run all of ESG. So if anyone has any questions about ESG, environmental, social, and governance, I can totally take that offline, but it's been an interesting and really fun journey.
Yeah, and you just talked about how we've been partners for 6 years and we developed this program 5 years ago. I would love to hear you talk a little bit about like what aspect of this partnership you're most proud of, because we've been working together for so long. And like we said, we're like the Carrie and Carrie show. And I think we've done some really innovative things together. So I'd love to hear from you, like what your favorite is.
Yeah, I think the goal of this panel was like letting people feel like they're in on a partnership call with us, which is like what we've been doing. When we started working 6 years ago and we sat down 5 years ago, myself and the chairman of our company went to Detroit to see the work you do in that community firsthand. And our chairman and your chairman only had about 36 hours between the two of them. And that's where the nickname 36 hours comes from, is that, can you actually have a deep immersive experience in 36 hours? And that was sort of the challenge. After that initial visit where it was just myself and two other people, you and I sat down, and I remember where we were in a cafe in Detroit, and I had really, really strong concerns about how could we take our consultant and employee base, which, let's be totally frank, was mainly upper middle class white women, and expect them to show up in a community like Detroit or like the Bronx or like Chicago and be supportive and active and engaged individuals, rather than sort of show up with their own assumptions, with their own expectations, and frankly with a little bit of a savior mentality. Yeah. So we worked really hard and made tweaks as the years went on to say, this is a special opportunity to come and be side by side in service with these students. You have to apply to be a part of this program. And we do training in advance to make sure that they're ready to show up to learn and observe and to champion the students, and not sort of do what adults love to do, which is jump in and take over and try to like save everybody. And that was just super, super important to both of us, I know, because it's so easy when you're planning volunteering to say, well, I need to get this many people into this many communities. And there's just a lack of conversation about how responsible are we being to make sure that everyone is having a positive experience. And then I'll say lastly, we started this program. We did a lot of work. You guys brought in McKinsey to kind of help you think this through. And I reached out to a professor friend of mine who specializes in African American and political science studies at Northwestern, and really looked at what we were doing and how we were doing it, and the before conversations and the during conversations, and said, this is really something called reverse exposure therapy, and there's elements of unconscious bias here where you are really flipping on its head the dynamic of who is the volunteer and who is being served and who's getting sort of those outcomes. So I'm just super proud of this program. And even though we only do a few of these every year, you have now replicated this, and you're doing this like with 10 other corporate partners. And so like for me, imitation is the best form of flattery.
Yeah. I mean, I think For us, it's been such a game changer because so much of our mission is grounded in solidarity and bringing people together, you know, across socioeconomic spectrums, across racial spectrums, across global and geographic locations, right? To do service and to really unite behind the idea that together we can all create change. And our students are doing this every day. So to be able to build a program that showcases their leadership, showcases how they're taking action on the issues that affect them most has been really powerful for our programs. And in fact, like, I'll talk about the funding in a minute, but it really helped us zero in on these leadership principles and leadership characteristics that we're calling constructive leadership now, that we're using to train corporations on, like, how are you a constructive leader and how does service build into this constructive leadership framework. We're using it to train our staff, and we're also using it to enhance our programmatic aspects in the work we do in our service learning programs, which is really incredible. And it's like focused on resiliency, empathy, a passion for the possible, courage, all of those things that really happen to you when you're serving. And then from a revenue perspective, like building this framework and finding a sustainable and like impactful way for corporations to get involved has opened the door to like incredible partnerships. Like right now we're in the middle of a virtual version of what we just talked about with Salesforce, like a 3-day virtual, we call them immersions, right, with Salesforce, where our students are coming into Salesforce's executive leadership program and are teaching them about service and teaching them about resilience and teaching them about empathy. And so it just sets our students up to be, you know, to showcase their leadership. And we, in the 5 years since we developed this program, you know, we've spun off lots of different similar programs, but we've been able to increase our revenue by $20 million, right? By creating different versions of this and testing it and piloting it. And so it's been, you know, we have an entire team doing this now. It's a part of our programmatic model, and we're starting to really get into M&E and like think about it from a very holistic perspective. But I think that all started because, you know, Carrie, coming from the nonprofit side, when we were thinking about how to engage her consultants or her employees, we were really thoughtful about like what works for Rodan and Fields, but what also works for Build On and what puts our students in the best possible position for leadership.
Yeah, that's 100% right. I mean, I ended up giving a talk with Salesforce, and sort of they were in the early stages of thinking about working with you guys, and I really sold them on like this like servant leadership perspective, which was like put the student and what the best outcomes are for the student at the center of the design, and then everything else will fall into place. The value add for the adults, the value add for you, the corporation, the value add for the school. So again, it's just been so great to see. And I think now more than ever, the fact that we've been doing this for 5 years, and in this moment of like, how do we create conversations between communities that don't have access to each other, do not know how to talk to one another, like those building blocks have already been there. And I think that there's so many people who have had the opportunity to say, you know, I stepped outside of myself and learned about somebody from a different culture, a different community, a different religion, a different race. And my hope is that the seed for those individuals was planted to say, I now know how to talk to a stranger, embrace in race equity conversations. And so for me, that was like, it was never about like how many bodies can we get into a community. It was about who's the right person to be there. How do we set everybody up for success so that that person is forever changed in how they will approach conversations and their own interactions in a community where they live.
And that's why the application process is so important. And we have so many corporate, because we're a service organization, right? We have so many corporations come to us and they say, okay, we've got 1,000 employees and we want to do a service project for 1,000 employees, you know, but that's not sustainable. And I think at Build On, we're really focused on like systemic issues and making real community impact. And so by having a partner who's like, okay, we're going to make sure people apply, that they really want to be there, that they understand why they're coming. And then we've even added like, you know, a bias and identity training before the event now. So that way people come in with the right attitudes and the right the ability to have the right conversations with our students. And I think that all comes from Carrie being so supportive and Rodan and Fields being so supportive. And to pivot on that, so like so much of our programs are built on these in-person experiences, and even service, so much of service is in person. And so when COVID hit, we really had to pivot, right? We had to figure out how to run our programs online. We had to figure out how to take these corporate partnerships online. And that's another place where you were really supportive, and you were really supportive for all of your other partnerships. And maybe you could talk a little bit about that and what you guys did.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the first months, we paid out all grantees in full, meaning we normally pay you guys quarterly, and we were like, look, just get them cash as fast as possible because you're probably struggling to cover payroll, which, was a super easy decision. But I was shocked to learn that you guys, in addition to several of our other international partners in Canada, partners in Australia, had people pull back, had people say, you know what, we were going to give you this and now we're not. And part of it was nervousness about the survival of their own business, perhaps, but it was also like, well, I understand you can't provide an in-service opportunity for me now, so I'm not gonna make good on that grant.
Yeah,
which was just so sad. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, we had one organization who shall remain nameless actually ask for their money back because we couldn't fulfill a volunteer program. So when you have someone who's like, okay, I know that you can't do the things that you would normally do, and in fact, we're going to give you your entire grant up front and not, parse it out over the year because you might need it. It's just, it really is transformational.
Well, I appreciate you hearing that. And I get that everybody comes from a different place, but our relationship with you is a relationship. It's not a transactional relationship. It's not like I give you something and you give me something back. It's we have trust and we've built this relationship. And I trust that you're going to figure out how to do something interesting and exciting from a virtual perspective that looks radically different than what we thought we were going to do. But I know you're going to come up with something that's going to work for us. And you did. I mean, talk a little bit about some of the adjustments you had to make to, obviously you guys work very closely in schools. Your staff was used to seeing these students every single day in person. They had to pivot to try to figure out how to check in on some of these students, make sure they were okay. Service in person, obviously a huge component of your model, was no longer available. I mean, so speak to that a little bit too.
Yeah, totally. I mean, like you said, so much, all of our service, I mean, we really take pride in being a direct service organization. So putting people in the community, helping each other, because those human moments are really what matter, right? And so when you're having to do it all digitally, it feels differently. And we got into a rhythm, and we were actually in May able to launch this campaign that was spurred by a conversation our CEO had with one of our students. And we called it Make Masks Save Lives. And we had a student who was basically talking about how at the time he couldn't get access to a mask, and he knew he needed a mask. And so we sent out service toolkits to all of our students, all of our corporate partners, and we made over 85,000 masks globally that our students could hand out to people in their community who need them, that we could send to some of our community-based partners, whether it's like soup kitchens or homeless shelters. So that way everybody could mask up. And the way we pivoted to engage corporate partners is we also sent them the same toolkit of supplies that we sent our students. And then we would get on a virtual Zoom call, and just like our students would in person, where they walk our corporate partners through the IPARD model of service learning, which stands for investigation, preparation, action, reflection, and demonstration. They would walk our corporate partners through all 5 steps as they were doing the project digitally. And actually, I think it's something that we're going to keep even after the pandemic ends and we're back to doing in-person service, because we have corporate partners who are all across the globe, who are in cities where we don't have programs, but teaching people how to do service, appropriately through that IPARD model of service learning, and giving our students that leadership capability is always really valuable. And we were even able to bring families into it in a way that we had never before. So that was one thing that was really powerful. And the other thing that we've pivoted is we started having more conversations with students about the type of service that they wanted to see. And, the conversation around racial justice has never, it should have always been as strong as it is right now. But our students are telling us, like, we want to do service-based and social justice. So we have revamped our curriculum and have centered it around a social justice service learning journey, which has been really powerful. And so, you know, again, that's another great place where Rodan and Fields supported us in supporting our staff and our board members to provide unconscious bias training for our entire organization. So maybe Carrie, I don't know, you can talk about that a minute too.
Yeah, I mean, after the murder of George Floyd, and we just started to see, you know, this desire to talk about what we were doing, we felt like we didn't really know how to say, hey, we've been supporting, you know, underserved and communities of color for a really long time. It sort of didn't feel like it wasn't capturing what was happening in the moment. So we did sort of come back around to, we want to provide unconscious bias training however you need to use it. So does your staff need it? Does your board need it? And let's be frank, your board and my board is mainly made up of older white men. And so if they're making conscious decisions about funding for communities of color, they probably need to go through this if they haven't, or if it's a refresher, or maybe some of your staff or new staff might need it. And so we actually provided this for all of our partners globally, Australia, Canada, Japan, et cetera, in addition to your grants, sort of as part of our corporate response to how we were, you know, trying to do our best as a corporation to address race equity. So I think it was like another $150,000 specifically for unconscious bias training, or I think you call it implicit bias training. So yeah, I mean, it was a small thing, but to hear you say also that it was something you needed, it was something that was helpful, I think again makes it feel really powerful.
Yeah, and I just want to say, like, one of the things I really appreciate that I would encourage other, both nonprofits and corporations to do, is to really think about in these times of crisis. I mean, like, we're in a constant crisis mode where every day there seems like something happens that we have to respond to as organizations, that you have to respond to as corporations. And sometimes that means that funding can bounce around. Like, you want to, you know, support this emergency effort this week. You want to support like this cause this week because it's whatever is in the news. And I would just really encourage people to think about like how you can pivot your own cause. Like, all of these issues are intersectional, right? And so whether we're talking about climate crisis, we're talking about racial justice, we're talking about COVID, there's typically some way where our cause can address those issues. And so being really thoughtful about how do you tailor your message to say, like, yes, we do have an impact in this area as well. And then for the corporate side, like, how can you find out like how your existing partners are taking action on these issues, and then support them when it comes to that, instead of necessarily diverting your funding to something else. That would, yeah.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that's coming up for me is like, you know, if you ask a board member what we fund, they'll say Build On, or they'll say, you know, a high need communities. But if you ask me what we fund, and if I would say the same as for you, we fund agency. Like, the communities you work in, the students you work in, you are there to come side by side and help those individuals reach their own level of agency. And I think that is fundamentally different than they couldn't do it without us, or they need our help. And so I think that thread is something that we're really leaning into. We've always really leaned into, but I think it's just really important because when we talk right now, like, we have a big convention coming up, I just made it really clear. It's like, look, this is not, let's talk about these students have had such a hard life, and now COVID, and it should not be about pity. It's about the fact that these communities, despite having faced a whole other set of challenges that normal people wouldn't normally face because of systemic racism and systemic inequity and all the things that we know are happening, they have something to teach us about what it means to be resilient. And so that youth resiliency message is something that we're really talking about during this moment, because it's just very easy to get caught up in, here's a laundry list of all the terrible things happening, versus these individuals are making and achieving their own like goals for themselves and goals for their life. And we're only here to be, you know, a support or a resource or a cheerleader. And so I think that's like an important thread that Carrie, you and I have always tried to make sure that the messaging is not an us versus them. It's a, what are we doing together and how can we sort of support one another? I know that was like a slight tangent, but I know we've been talking about pivoting messaging. And I think during this time of COVID and all these other things happening, how can you look at current partnerships, your current work, your current grantees, and look for ways in which it is relevant to what's happening. There is a common thread, and that you don't need to stop funding a partner and run over here and fund something else. Like, and so I guess if there's folks who, you know, have experienced the struggle with how do I message what work we're doing when it seems like there's a new emergency for us to try to address every minute, like I think Carrie and I are like, we're open to brainstorming like how you can and should lean into the work that you have been doing and just find ways to make it relevant to what seems to be happening around us. Carrie, any closing thoughts before we open it up to Q&A?
No, I think Q&A is great. Again, I know I'm bragging on Rodan and Fields a lot, but they've really been a great partner. So I just want to thank you for taking the time to have this conversation, Carrie, and thank Jen for inviting us. But yeah, let's answer some questions.
Thank you so much for sharing. I think the most sort of uplifting thing about chatting with you throughout all of this, because we were chatting even when we thought we were going to have an in-person event. So seeing how your partnership has evolved and changed in this time period has been really tremendous. And I'm just so impressed that Carrie Pandoli, you know, that Rodan and Fields agreed to release all the funding ahead of the year versus pull back, or what I've heard a lot of companies and nonprofits do, kind of go on pause and sort of, you know, figure it out later. So I'm really just impressed that you're able to keep it going. And also something that a lot of corporations need to hear is that, you know, providing a volunteer opportunity isn't always an easy lift. In fact, it's one of the hardest lifts that nonprofits can provide. So, so I think it's really cool how you've structured it, that, you know, Rodan and Fields consultants need to really show that they're interested and show that they want to give back in a meaningful way before they're kind of granted that access. So I think that's really impressive. Let me just see if we have any questions. If anyone wanted to put up any questions for Carrie and Carrie. I think it was just a lot of complimentary comments. So, so if you do, let's see. Okay, very inspiring to see such a deep partnership. This is from Hope Freeman, with deep respect and support. Question: could you talk about some bumps or obstacles you faced along the way and any solutions?
I could talk about one, Carrie, and then maybe you can take another one. But like, I think like from a diversity and inclusion perspective, when we first started the program, right, we, like Carrie said, consultants are largely, you know, white, middle-aged, upper middle class women, and we're coming into predominantly Black, Indigenous, people of color communities, right? And we wanted to make sure that the conversations we were having were really fruitful, that they were trauma informed, that our students were showcases the leaders they are, and prevent, you know, like what Carrie said, some of the white saviorism that can happen when like this kind of volunteerism happens. And I think sometimes we miss the mark, like at the beginning, you know, of the partnership. And I think over the 5 years we've been doing it, we've been developing the program. We're still evolving the program to make sure that everything we do is based in research. It's cross-cultural immersion. We're thinking about how to do the implicit bias and have the hard conversations before volunteers have access to our students about how they walk into the community, and understanding the beauty of communities like the Bronx and all of the ways that systemic racism and systemic oppression have led to these issues, you know, whether it's food insecurity or whatever. And so I think that that's one stumbling block we had, that we've been really we've made a lot of progress on and we continue to make progress on. But I think that cultural immersion and solidarity and bringing people of different backgrounds together is so critical that it's worth taking the effort to make sure we get it right.
Yeah, I would echo that. I mean, I think I don't know if this was a hypothetical question that I kept using as an example or if it was an actual question, but I said, what if one of our well-meaning volunteers shows up and starts asking like, well, where's your mom or where's your dad, without having any kind of forethought of like their parents may not be around for very important reasons, and that they're being raised by grandparents, etc. And I remember having a very long conversation over lunch with a group of our consultants from everywhere, someone from Kansas, someone from Illinois, someone from Florida, about what was ICE. We were on Oakland High School's campus, and this was at the height of sort of the immigration raids, and there were all these signs over campus that said, know your rights. If ICE shows up, here's what you do. And there were consultants were like, well, what does this mean? I was like, well, immigration enforcement shows up on high school campuses and is taking these kids. And they were like, why and how and what's the legal ramifications? And so I felt like I was like giving a crash course in politics and, sort of injustice. And again, for me, all 10 of those individuals may not have suddenly changed their mind about how they feel about immigration, but they now saw it, they experienced it, they talked to me, and they talked to a student who spoke from a place of, this is a very scary time and this is the reality I deal with every day. So yeah, and again, I always overthought what we should do and how we should do it. And I think Carrie came from a place of like, trust us, we've got it. And these students, really know what to do and are really coming from a place of like, they want to show and share, and they want people to see them for who they are, and they want to showcase their leadership.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. And I think, I don't know if you mentioned this, and if I missed it, I'm sorry, but I know you pivoted and started to provide both hotspots and tablets for the students at Bolden, because there is a high need for those doing remote learning for equipment and Wi-Fi.
Yeah, so as we pivoted to digital programs, like we've all read about the digital divide and how Wi-Fi and our telecommunication companies just aren't putting the same resources into communities of color that they should be, or the communities where we work. And so we knew that some of our students were struggling not only to participate in build-on programs, but also into, their classroom, their digital remote online learning. And so we did a tech assessment survey, tried to figure out like which of our students needed what kind of resource, because some school districts are providing it and some school districts aren't, right? And so we were able to build that into our program now, specifically like some of these digital immersion programs that when students sign up, we're able to either give them a hotspot. We use Mobile Beacon, who's also a partner of ours and a funder, and then provide low-cost tablets so that they can do that as well.
Okay, great. We have a question from my lead advisor, Keisha White. This, she's basically asking, can you offer any insight as to how you message sort of why you're working with these communities? And I think this is more directed towards Carrie Pendley, because, Rodan and Fields, I know you work a lot on your messaging as to why you work with Build On. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, the beginning of the partnership was really about our founders of the company actually live in Oakland. And so there was a real desire for us to get involved with Oakland. And so it kind of started like very simple and very small, and Build On does a lot of work in Oakland. And then I think through the nature of like, it's important for us to create a sense of community and understanding in and where we live and operate. But there's a lot of communities that don't have access to each other. So because we're global and we're rural and we're also urban, like there is a gap and a divide between people's experiences and their opportunity to sort of like interact with people from different experiences. And I think the other thing is like, as a company, we have found it difficult to sort of say, yes, we're going to have all of our grant making be directed towards systemic change, breaking down systemic racism, breaking down systemic policing policies, because we're consumer facing. And so some of our consumer facing demands is we need to provide opportunities for customers to get involved, where I feel like sometimes big foundations and even B2B companies can sort of make big bets. There's a great research paper done by Bridgespan about the importance of big bets and saying, like, we're putting down, tens of millions of dollars to address this big, larger issue. I do think it's harder for consumer brands and companies to make those big bets. It doesn't mean we should or shouldn't. And I think I always look for ways that we can do it in small increments. But I'd love to hear from other folks that have seen companies say, we're going to make a big bet on a big issue that stems decades and multiple sectors, not just, government, but the school system and all of the players involved, and how you sort of have been able to tackle that. And then Carrie, I don't know if you have thoughts about how we've messaged it, because I think we're also very, again, I'm overly sensitive, having worked on both sides of the house, coming from the nonprofit side and being now in a corporation. Like, I'm very aware that we are predominantly upper middle class white. And so how do we showcase our work in a way that feels balanced and not sort of really looking at it as an us and them?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I think, like you said, you're very careful. We've been very careful on the messaging. And I think the place that Roden and Fields has always been, at least from my perspective, it's about youth leadership, and it's about building leadership from within communities and not trying to parachute in and solve problems. And I think when we have conversations about the service that we're doing, like for instance, I was on a call yesterday and we were talking about food insecurity, and we were going through with some of our donors and our students a time, talent, treasure exercise. Like, what can I do? Everybody has time, talent, and treasure, and how can you use that to address this issue? And a lot of the conversations were coming back, well, I can spend more time at the soup kitchen, or I can, contribute food to a food pantry. And like, yes, definitely do that. But also, like, why is there systemic hunger? Like, let's talk about how the food in our public schools are not nutritional. They don't serve our students. Like, what can we be doing from an advocacy and a policy standpoint to try to fix that issue? Like, why does that issue exist? And so I think that's all, built into the IPARD model of service learning. But I think that's really what it's about, is like, how can we teach people to be change agents in the right way that creates sustainable, thoughtful change? And I think Carrie has always been really good at showing that to her consultants and her consumers, because we all have different issues that we care passionately about. We're all in different communities and they all have different needs. And so, like, my standpoint, and I think the message that Roden Fields has been really great about sharing, is like, it's about learning how to serve in a way that's sustainable.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, I know we're kind of out of time, but I just want to say thank you so much for joining us and for sharing this really tremendous partnership. And I know it's, even though you're 6 years in, it seems like it's just the beginning, and you guys are really going to keep it moving. So thank you for your expertise and time.
Thank you.
Next we have, I refer to her as cause marketing nobility, but Maureen Carlson is the Chief Programs and Marketing Officer for Children's Miracle Network. She has over 2 decades of corporate social responsibility experience. She's been a nonprofit executive. She's also been on the agency side and led securing over 150 million in fundraising, and then also billions of impressions. So let's see if, Maureen, can you share your screen with us?
Let me see what I can do here. I should, you never know how technology is going to work today, but hopefully you're all seeing something.
It's so funny because we had a smoother tech day on day 1, which I thought, day 2 is going to be a breeze, but
never know. In our digital era, you never know. So do you see the the lead slide there?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah, it looks great. I'll let you take it away. Thank you so much for being here.
Of course, and thank you for that kind introduction. I appreciate it. It is lovely to see everyone, or at least see your names in the gallery view. Lots of folks I recognize and actually miss getting together and seeing with. So it is an honor to be here speaking with you and among you. So I'm going to take just a little bit of time and talk a little bit about Children's Miracle Network Hospitals and the corporate department there, or the corporate relationships that Children's Miracle Network Hospitals has. Just a little bit of background first. And then we will launch into our formula for success, and then how we had to pivot that through COVID. And hopefully you will gain some nuggets of information. But I will do my best. I'm not the best at it, but I will do my best at leaving enough time for questions. Okay. So this is me. You already heard who I am. I've been doing this for a really long time. First in the corporate space as the person that was in charge of, we called it community relations then. It was way back a long time ago. Sometimes I don't like to think about how long ago it was, at American Honda. And then, yes, have worked in an agency, owned agencies, social impact consulting, corporate partnership consulting, cause marketing, as we like to call it, lots of different vernacular there, and have been in-house both as a consultant and now at Children's Miracle Network Hospitals to help future-proof their fundraising and work on their brand. So here's just some quick information. You see, what you see here is a visual. There are over 150 corporate partners that Children's Miracle Network has in its repertoire, but that's across the board. Those aren't all what we would consider cause marketing or strategic corporate partnership relationships. They're multifaceted and raising tens of millions of dollars. But across the network, sponsorships too are in that. There's 150 overall partners. Last year, those partnerships alone, the organization raised almost getting close to $500 million, but the corporate relationships raised $220 million in 2019. The average partner, and I'll show you a slide in just a minute that breaks that down a little bit more, is a 20-year partner. And that's the big formula that we have really in terms of how to keep partnerships strong and refresh them. And how do you keep a partnership for, you'll see some are over 30 years. So average partnership though, if you average it out, is about 20 years. And we're talking about in terms of retail locations. And I know that's certainly morphing as we move to across the omni-channel and to digital fundraising, but represent about 30,000 locations. So if we're thinking about 2020 and we're thinking specifically about those corporate partnerships, there's about 90 of those, about 90 corporate partnerships that I think would qualify using a definition of cause marketing, or again, a multifaceted corporate relationship at Children's Miracle Network Hospitals. And the 2020 outlook forecasting right now is $240 million. And you'll notice that's up. So we feel very, very, very grateful that that fundraising has remained strong this year. And we'll get into a little bit, you know, a little more detail about why we think that fundraising has remained strong and what our key corporate partners have told us. So here's a look at some of the relationships, just to give you a sense of some of those 90. So Marriott is the first partner of Children's Miracle Network Hospitals. It's been a partner for 38 years, certainly having some issues this year in terms of that sector and what's going on in that sector based on COVID, but still very robust conversations with them about what they can do. They're still stepping up to try to support or try to think of something that they can do, even though their sector is really, really hit hard right now. Walmart is a 34-year partner. Costco is 33 years. You see Ace Hardware at 30 years. Remax, so that's your, agents that are selling houses, is a 29-year partner. There are a couple others that fall into that repertoire. And then people usually ask me how long Panda Express has been a partner, and they've been a partner for 14 years. If you look at this year's campaigns, the Walmart campaign, which took place over 3 years, went direct to consumer across the omni-channel, and I'll get into that. So it wasn't just manned registers. It was a campaign that went through mobile at the curbside pickup, It was on e-commerce, self-checkouts, and at the man registers. It raised almost $40 million, and it was up 30% year over year. Ace Hardware's Roundup campaign, they do several campaigns throughout the year. They generally raise around $15 million, but that campaign that just ended, their current Roundup campaign, was up over 40% year over year. Panda Express does about $24 million every year for Children's Miracle Network, again, direct from consumer at the register donations. And we're not sure yet because that is an annual campaign. It doesn't have a specific time frame exactly what that's going to do in 2020. We certainly have projections, but we're not exactly sure. Okay, so I'm just going to spend a little bit of time just because it's a big question that I get. So I oversee all the programmatic future proofing of fundraising and all of the marketing and communications. There is an experience team, which I do have some oversight of. Those are the day-to-day people that are speaking and raising money in the moment. The programs team is really about how do we pivot? What is the marketplace saying? What's the data saying? How do we have to evolve this? And there's a team of people working on that, and then marketing and communications. So if you talk to those holistic groups, if you pull that experience or customer team together and that future proofing programs team together, and you talk about what it takes to create a relationship that is that long, this is sort of our pre-COVID formula. This is what we were doing. It's our relationship formula, for a lack of a better way of saying it, that about 10% of our activities in our time have to be based on defining the use of funds. So what did we do with the money that you gave us? And how do we communicate that all the way down to the customer that donated the money when that actually didn't come through, you know, the corporate entity was the pass through. So what is that use of funds? We have some very interesting insights that I'll talk about post-COVID and moving from impact to outcomes as a necessary thing we need to do. But how do we do that? How do we look across? We are a banner organization, I should have said that, of 159 separate hospitals that are either freestanding or within hospital systems. Again, just children's hospitals and children's health. But how do you define that impact and that use of funds across 159 children's hospitals when that money is donated and unrestricted to those hospitals? So that's something we work a lot on, defining the use of funds, where your money went, and what it did for the children and the lives of those children and their families in the communities in which the children's hospitals reside. So about 10% of the time is spent on that. About 20% of the time is spent on experiential. And what I mean there is that in those 159 hospitals, there are staff people. There are CMN, Children's Miracle Network, sorry for using the acronym, Children's Miracle Network hospital staff in those markets. And so we have found as a key element to driving a 30-year relationship is that the relationships within the organization span. It's not just one-to-one on a national level, you know, a national representative of us talking to a national corporate partner. We also have relationships with local managers, division managers, or however those organizations, because they all do it a little bit different, break out those field teams. We have relationships and we try to bake relationships at every level. And if you think about it, you know, a store manager of a Walmart may end up being the SVP of something 20 years from now. So we have those conversations constantly. Also within that experiential bucket is the relationships direct to the employees in the stores. So we do a lot of things from Facebook communities to store visits to kickoff meetings to thank you meetings that are all about the employees at the manned registers, where we have lots of conversation and lots of ways we try to connect directly to them and make them know they are heroic in what they're doing when they ask to round up or for a donation at register. So experiential is a big thing, and the local connectivity we feel is a big part of the success of the formula. Engagement, that's employee engagement. I'm sure you've heard a lot about it. How do you engage the employees, not just to give through employee giving, but how do we do that? You heard a couple ways. I just said that we do it constantly, but what are your opportunities to engage? And we do spend a lot of time on that. Have we increased our engagement level with employees? Do we have to move that to a digital space? Is it just physical volunteering? How do we do this in this day and age and keep evolving that? Communication is about 15% of the time. And so I used to like to say as a consultant, and I'm sure the consultants on the phone are smiling a little bit, please don't only talk to that corporate partner one time when you're trying to pitch them, when you're trying to sell them, and you're trying to roll out the campaign. We spend a lot of time in year-round communications, year-round relationship building and communications at every level, from employee at a man register all the way up to the CEO. Media, that's just our ROI. What are we bringing to the partnership? What are we doing to leverage our assets, our brand, our mailing lists, our social platforms? What are we doing to come to that partnership and that relationship and say, what can we do to help? We have limited resources and we'd really like that money. 100% of that money does stay local. So we have to keep it doing that. So we have limited budgets and limited abilities, I guess, to do things across our assets, but we are willing to do it. And what is the thing that would matter the most to you, company X? So lots of time spent on ROI as well. And then we measure the heck out of everything. So you heard me talk about impact and use of funds. We measure that. We measure, when we do any PR campaign or a social campaign, we measure engagement. We measure, all of the activities that we do in the local market that goes direct to a local store or to a local manager or division manager. We measure, catalog, track all of that so that the national point of contact has an understanding of what's happening all throughout the field and all these different relationships and communications that are happening. So that, I would say, was our is still our kind of formula for success. And people have tended to ask us about that a lot. How do you do this? How do you keep a relationship for 30 years, 38 years, 33 years? How do you have partners and more than one, that are raising tens of millions of dollars in an annual year? When I think it was 2 years ago, Walmart hit the $1 billion mark. And I don't mean to general causes. They've given billions to causes, both through their relationships in store, their high profile campaigns, the work they do in environment. So I'm talking just with Children's Miracle Network hospitals over those 38 years, they have given and have reached the $1 billion mark. So how do you maintain those? And we are really prescriptive about it. This is the formula. And there's lots of different tactics and activities, as you can imagine, that go into each one of those. But we do believe that the secret sauce is really that national relationship. So you can have something that affects, the entire, well, we're in Canada too, the US and Canada, but also so that one point of contact to help me do that, but also all this amazing stewardship and experiential conversations along the whole local chain, if that makes sense. So that's a quick look at our formula, for lack of a better way of saying it. Well, and so, well, there you go. And then we had a little thing or a little phrase or a little word come up this year that changed everybody's lives and changed everybody's world. And so we were well underway, right? January, February, looking at, all the campaigns and how they start and the programs. We do lots of programmatic work too in the peer-to-peer space. And so looking at all of that in our typical fashion and through our typical lens, and then, everything changed and the world changed, and we had to figure out what we were going to do and how we were going to come out of that. So I would say, and I've heard a lot about this, especially Carrie just talking about relationship and partnership. So we like to dub it, right, as strategic partnerships or corporate partnerships, but we have learned through this. I mean, we knew it, I think, instinctively. It's part baked into our formula, but I mean, it came through in shining bright lights that it's really about the relationships that you have built with those organizations, how you have done that to deepen the bench throughout the organization. Have you spent enough time on the employees, the front end staff, the employees throughout the organization and throughout the country, so they understand the cause? And more important than just understanding the cause, do they understand what they're doing, what they're changing, the outcomes and the impact they have on a child's life, on a family? And that's 10 million times over. That's how many visits there are in our member hospitals year over year. Do they understand that they're heroic, and they show up in lots of heroic ways, and we couldn't do this, and we couldn't provide the resources to the hospitals to make sure that that funding gap between government funding and what a children's hospital actually needs, that we bridge that gap without them, that they are heroic. And you know, the brands that have been with us a long time and have done a really good job, they push that down. They don't necessarily take national credit. You don't see them out doing campaigns, and you'll never see it. You might see it a little bit for their campaign with Feeding America, but for CMN, or sorry, Children's Miracle Network Hospitals, Walmart doesn't do national advertising around that. Instead, it is all about helping their employees understand, and that's our core goal with them, what they've done, what they created, how they've changed the world. But just by simply engaging through a register ask or in their job that they're in. So we get that, and I think that's not life altering to you all, that you understand that, but we pivoted just like you all did immediately in terms of communication. And that communication out of the gate was not, oh geez, what's going to happen to our campaign? It was, how are you? Are you okay? I mean, we called Marriott Vacations and Delta and said, we know we're a cause, but is there anything we can do to help you? Is there anything you need? We are devastated for you. So those conversations were very authentic, because they've had those conversations, those relationships sort of moment after moment, year after year. But it was really just about that. It wasn't about us. It was, wow. Lots of the Walmart employees, the Ace employees, the Costco employees, they never got to go home, right? They were front end staff or urgent staff that was needed to keep us all, or give us an ability to stay at home. All their trucking services, like all those people were still working. They weren't home quarantining. And so we were talking to them about, is everyone okay? Are you okay? Is there anything our hospitals can do? They're not adult hospitals, but anything. So those were the initial conversations. They were really about, how are they doing? And just reinforcing that these are relationships. These are relationships that we care about, and we care about them individually just as much as we do about them as a brand that donates to us. So that communication was key, and slowly that communication evolved. If you talk to Julie Breckenkamp, who oversees our national corporate partners, she would say that, you know, then the conversation started to evolve. The corporations would say, well, what can we do for you? Because you guys are hospitals, right? You're on the front end of this as well. And those conversations started to morph into, okay, so what should we do? Could we do? Is it the right thing to do the campaign? And in the course of those conversations, we realized that they didn't understand the impact that this was having on children's health. So it wasn't immediately on the news. The news didn't blow up about children's health. It certainly blew up about hospitals and adults, and there was some sort of reporting here and there about how children were reacting to COVID and what that looked like. But you know, the children's hospitals were mandated by their state governors, just like everybody else, to shut down elective services, shut down the ER, shut down, all those things that are quote unquote money makers within a hospital. So lots of revenue was lost. They get very worried now, even now, about people who are not coming in because they don't feel safe to get immunized because they need a checkup, because they sprained something. You know, they get very concerned about the overall impact of safety, but lots of things, millions and millions and millions of dollars lost. You can see that minimum reported total revenue losses across our network were $5.7 billion. And what that affects is the unrestricted funds. So it affects the charitable care that they can give in every market to families who can't afford it. It affects the purchasing or the use of very specialized equipment that children need because they grow little different needs as opposed to adults. And so, you know, we were trying to really show them, and we had a lot of Zoom calls where we gathered our partners to say, here's what's happening in adult hospitals. Here's how it's affecting children's hospitals. Children's hospitals are pivoting to take in adult patients. Children's hospitals are pivoting to do research. Just like adult hospitals or other entities. So we had a lot of conversation just about how it was affecting us. And I know I heard a little bit about that too. Like is your cause affected through all of this? We certainly did a lot of research on that and combed a lot of data and tried to educate our partners very directly about that. So that was sort of communication, relationship, how are you doing? Here's sort of the impact on our collective cause here. So you are aware as you're having conversations internally with your boards of directors, your C-suite executives, your operations teams about what's right or wrong to do during this time, you have some of that information as well. You are armed with the information about what's happening in the children's hospitals that you've supported for decades. The next thing we did was a marketing pivot. So we don't spend a lot of money. We don't have a ton of money to spend on advertising or ad spends. The advertising we do is very specific around boosting donations. So, you know, how do we boost participants in our Extra Life Gaming campaign? And what does that advertising look like to boost participants? We don't do a ton of it. We don't have a big budget for it, and we don't have a big ad buy in any space, traditional or digital. But we do have, you know, lots of stuff that go on in social, lots of different social platforms. We have a PR initiative that's pretty robust these days. We also do a lot of point of sale materials. So the materials that are around the register, whether that's in the e-commerce space, manned register, self-checkout, or curbside pickup. So we get a lot of exposure that way. So we decided to pivot our marketing and our communications, and we pivoted to this kind of a message. That kids can't wait. They can't wait for a vaccine. They can't wait for us to return to normal, especially those that have chronic disease or chronic illness like type 1 or cancer or a plethora of different diseases that kids have. They can't wait. And so we pivoted our point of sale materials to this, our social, any digital advertising we were doing to support that, those conversations from a marketing team, supporting the conversations that the fundraising team were having in terms of the urgency still around this cause and what was happening in the slide I showed you previously from the numbers and the losses of the children's hospitals. So we did this, and you know, we tested it. We launched it without testing it. So, you know, there you go, nonprofit marketing. We don't have a ton of money to stop and beta test messages. But we launched it and have since tested it, and it tests very well, that it has good resonance. We also are seeing the point of sale campaigns, you know, like I said, 30% up here, 40% up here year over year. So it is, we think it's working just based on the data that we've pulled, and that it's a good reminder that they can't wait. They're still getting sick, or they still are sick, and they need to have a place to go to in order to be healthy or to get healthy even during these times. And then we changed activation, right? And so you guys were talking a little bit about this as well. So the picture on the left is just about the omni-channel. We amped up conversations around the omni-channel. So if you were just giving to us, or it was just a campaign that was about a manned register, we asked you to consider the e-commerce space, the self-checkouts, and any mobile activities that you do, either through a sub app or through their own, you know, sort of curbside pickup or whatever that might be. Some of them use separate apps to do that. You know, the Walmarts of the world have their own ability and own apps to do that. So we immediately amped up that conversation. We'd been having it for about 5 years with them to try to get into all those different tactics and move just from the manned register. It was very successful as their worlds turned digital, some of them, or there was a big emphasis on digital. It seemed like the world converged in a really positive way. So that is what happened at Walmart for the first time. Manned registers, self-checkouts, mobile pickup, and e-commerce were all a part of that campaign, which is why it was 30% up year over year. So we started that conversation across the board. Not everybody moved to the entire omni-channel, but lots of consideration. And we certainly emphasize Roundup. If I can tell you anything, I think you already know, Roundup is a game changer. Don't ask for $1, don't ask for $2, ask them to round up. At Casey's alone, we saw 101% increase year over year, moving from a $1 donation ask to a Roundup. And Roundup is much easier for the manned staff, the manned registers. So they don't have to say, will you make a donation? It's a simple Roundup. It's an easy ask. It's great psychology, you know, for the asker and the donor. So that's something we started to push too in that omni-channel was Roundup. Then we changed all the materials, like we changed what those kits look like. We changed the materials that we sent. This is something that goes in the back room, right, of employees to inspire them about how far they are. That Phoebe logo is a local hospital logo because it's very beloved in a local market. And we changed all of that. Like, what is the right messaging? Is it appropriate? Do you want signage at all? Do you want it to be a quiet ask? And Publix made it a quiet ask. The public chain in the Southeast, it was a quiet ask. There was no point of sale. There was no POP. That's what they wanted. That's what they were comfortable with. That's what we did. So we just pivoted how we delivered stuff. And for the most part, Children's Miracle Network hospitals is a big question I get. So I'm just going to answer it here, whether you're asking or not. Pay for those materials. We do not ask the companies to pay for those. We print and ship to them. They usually disperse, through their own means, disperse to their actual locations, but we print and ship. And then we also pivoted all our kickoffs, all the stuff we usually do that's in person that we get on planes for, we pivoted it digitally, like you all have, to Zoom or to other platforms, and really tried to remain inspiring people. So hard to do, but remain inspiring people even in the digital world. So here's what we learned, and I'm just trying to be cognizant to leave some time for questions and or to catch up on your agenda, Jen. Here's what we learned. So customer intimacy matters, and that's what I would say we have been pretty conscious of. When I had that slide up that said relationship and partnership, this is really what it boils down to. Instead of customer service, instead of calling up and taking an order, or not really stepping up as a nonprofit expert, not just about our mission, but about how to fundraise and what the customer wants and what the consumer wants to hear and what they respond to in terms of marketing, and how often they should be talking about their own CSR. When do they cross that line of looking self-serving? When they talk about it themselves as a company, where do we step up to help with that? Those are the kinds of conversations that the National Corporate Partnership team, and really the entire field team, has with our corporate partners. It's very intimate conversations about what do they need and how can we, in whatever capacity we have, help that and help them with that. And so we have learned that it matters. It really does matter. It changes the conversation, and it certainly, I think, makes us a much valuable player, just beyond just mission, which always ranks very high. Children's health and making sure that children can thrive is always something that ranks on national research as high. We do that research ourselves, and it ranks high. But the whole customer intimacy thing matters. Local, I said it before, sort of ad nauseum. It is our secret sauce, I think, really, that we have invested in staff in those 159 markets. We have invested in a field staff. We're high in headcount here to make sure that we are having local relationships, leveraging local ROI, having local conversations at every level, showing up now digitally, but used to physically in locations during campaign, and inspiring that front end staff to keep asking if that's the campaign that we're doing. So local matters. It matters, and being able to show all the activities that happen in support of that brand or support of that company across the country has made a big difference in our conversations with our national partners. I'm going to say this one till I am literally screaming it from some sort of end game when I'm done doing this, that it matters as a nonprofit that your marketing and your fundraising is integrated. We couldn't have those customer intimate conversations and arm a fundraising team with information about consumer response and all the research we do and who's responding to the brand and pivoting all that messaging quickly to support relevancy. You just couldn't do it. We could not do it to the extent that we do if marketing and fundraising were two divisions that were off doing separate things. And I hear it a lot. I've heard it a lot since I started consulting in 2006. And lots of questions I used to get as a consultant about how do I bridge marketing and fundraising together better? Well, in CMN's case, they just put it all under me so that they are forced. But it is a good thing to make sure that you have the same goals. It isn't just a market to market. What are the goals and how do they drive fundraising, and how do we pivot together in what's happening in the world and what's happening with the marketplace so that we are doing that with the most success that we can. And then I mentioned really quickly that early on that we spend a lot of time measuring use of funds, but we are moving to outcomes. So what do I mean by that? We are very quickly engaging in a data project where we will be able to say beyond you bought this piece of equipment or you helped facilitate this one children's health visit through an ER, to here's how your donations and the health of that child now changes your community in terms of financial outcomes for that community, health outcomes, mental health. What are you actually doing to drive the success of that community? And as we tee that up to our partners, they are salivating over that information. And I don't know if any companies on the line could reinforce that, but what we're hearing is we would love you to be able to go from we bought a diaper for a NICU baby to when that child got out of the hospital and could reach their fullest potential possible because they're now healthy. How did that change that community? How did it change the family? And then really, how did it change our future? Because that child reached their full potential and transformed their community. So that's what we're moving to in terms of measurement of use of funds. We'll always be able to say, your money was this much went to charitable care, or this much went to equipment, or this much went to social work. But we're trying to move to outcomes because we are seeing an extremely positive response to that. If we could get that data and if we can measure that and create the right algorithm for that, then people would be really excited to see that. So I know I talked really fast. That was really, really fast, threw a lot at you. And I was trying to, again, Jen, be a little cognizant of time and help you catch up a little bit on the agenda. But I hope that covers for people, and if there's any questions, I'm happy to take them. We're really transparent at Children's Miracle Network, how we do things, and more the merrier in terms of knowledge. But I hope that helps a little bit about kind of where we were before and what we were doing before in terms of these major corporate partnerships at Children's Miracle Network, and then what we pivoted to and what we did, and then what we've learned from that.
That was amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. And yes, that was a lot of information, and it was really I'm speaking for myself, but I thought it was all really relevant and helpful. I know from being on the partnership side, local matters. And so the fact that you have that, and also the synergy between fundraising and marketing and program is so important. And the fact that you're overseeing kind of both fundraising and marketing, that really uniquely positions you and the organization to set up for success with these partnerships. So that's wonderful to hear. I do have a couple questions that did come in and some compliments. So let's see. We have Janelle Lynn from Donors Choose. She asks, Maureen, our team at Donors Choose are huge fans of your team and your work. I appreciate your omni-channel strategy, but we find that most e-commerce companies seem unsure of how to integrate charity at the checkout. What are your best practices for e-commerce engagement? And do you bring digital tools and plugins to your partners, or do your partners develop them? I'm sure it's a combination of both.
Yeah, no, that is literally, I love that question because that's the right question. So it's interesting. We did create a plugin or worked with a company to create a plugin, but the only people that have been really interested in that are smaller, medium to smaller companies that just don't have the in-house IT. The Walmarts, Costco's, Panda of the world, I mean, just to get through their procurement process to bring a solution is challenging. And then, our contacts are really like Carrie. They're the CSR executive. They are not the IT executive. They are not the operations executive. And so it's been a challenge to say, oh, the charity partner is going to bring you a widget, bring you something for your IT team to take a look at. And so what we found is that, again, just to go back and not go too on a tangent, is that the smaller companies some are interested in that widget. But for the most part, they're not, they can also read stats. They get that the world is booming and the world is pivoting e-commerce. They're a member of our society as well. They don't need us to give us all those stats. What we've found is that if we have a person, an advocate, and we always turn to ACE. There's a lady named Chris Doucette that works at ACE who's in charge of their corporate giving, and she reports to Kane Calamari, who's the head of the foundation and an SVP of HR there. those two people always, every time we ask, are willing to go have a conversation with another partner to say how they convinced their IT teams to make it a priority to move the charitable giving up the e-commerce ask or across that omni-channel. Because it's usually not, you know, do they know that we want to do this and wouldn't this be great for the cause? They get all that, but they have a priority list in terms of their e-commerce and the charitable partnership sometimes is low on that list. And, you know, Kane Calamari as an SVP of HR isn't going to go yelling at his IT guy. It doesn't work. So that's what we've done. We've actually offered to say, you know, if Kane or Chris can be of any help, even Walmart at this point, we have a great contact there out of the Southwest, is willing to get on the phone with other partners to say, here's how I got it through. That's usually more helpful than us educating, us pushing, or us creating any widget, is talking to a colleague who convinced their internal executive team that it was the right thing to do and how they did that. So I would go find a champion. I can kind of see Carrie nodding. I don't know if you agree, Carrie, but that has worked wonders for us.
Mm-hmm. Great. And if anyone else has resources in terms of digital plugins for Roundup at Register, please, you know, drop them in the comments or put them on Slack, and we'll make sure other folks get access to them. We did have one question from Camille Horn. She asks, how are you working to collect outcome data?
Hi, Camille. Okay, we are actually, so you can imagine, right? I know who the question came from and love her. Really hard, and I know you have chapters too. So we are right now looking at, are we going to do it holistically, or are we going to break it down like 5 markets at a time? And what we're going to do is lots of research, deep research, questionnaires, surveys of those hospitals, but working with their population and health sciences to ask very specific questions that should help drive these outcomes. And we're not doing it alone. We're right now in an RFP with 4 different agencies that sort of specialize in this to help us figure out what are the right outcomes we should be looking at, and then how are those representative of an entire network of hospitals that all kind of do things just a little bit differently. So it's intense data collection and data mining, but we're defining what those outcomes are. So is it around mental health? Is it around customer? Is it around community financial stability? Is it around, we're defining those first and then working those questions backwards. And we are doing that with a vendor.
Thank you so much. Let me just see if there's anything else here. Someone says, if you want to get it done right, put Maureen Carlson in charge. Great. Well, thank you so much, Maureen. It's like I said, I'm honored to have you speak this year, and you have such great insights to share and such a diversity of experience over your years of doing this. So we appreciate you joining us and sharing the insightful kind of secrets to long-term 35+ long partnerships. So
by the way, just real quick, we are an open book. We don't believe in the whole, like, we have secrets that are only about us. So if anybody ever has any questions, you can contact me. I think you said you're sending out contact information. Clark Sweat is the COO and has been at Children's Miracle Network forever, running the fundraising. He would take a call from anyone. Julie Breckenkamp, who runs the national, we're willing to share anything. So please do not hesitate to reach out if you have questions. I've sat in the nonprofit chair, I'm sitting in it now, and sometimes I just want to pick up the call and ask you guys, what are you doing? What are you doing? So feel free to do that at any time.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Have a good rest of your day. Suzanne Halling Duffy, she is coming to us all the way from Sweden. She is in charge of external affairs for Mälardalen University. She has been she spoke on nonprofit or on Cause Marketing Summit's panel over 5 years ago, and I'm so lucky that we've taken away our physical barriers and she's able to join us in hosting this panel, this very important panel.
Great. Thank you so much, Jen. This is really one of the beauties, right, of being able to do a virtual. We're from different coasts in the US, and I'm here in Sweden where it's dinner time. It's 8 p.m. So this is a really great program, and I've really learned a lot from listening to everyone today. So our panel will be talking about multidimensional collaborations. We have a fintech company, a B Corp, and a more traditional foundation that doesn't necessarily do traditional stuff. But I'm a long-term New York City resident from Sweden originally, but lived in New York for many years. And there I worked on partnerships both around the US, globally, and also around the New York City region, big and small. And I really thrive in these environments where several partners can just come together and solve problems and really do it together in an innovative way, creative way. So today we have Samir Goel, co-founder and co-CEO of Isuzu, Eric Wolski, community partnership. Eric, what is your exact title? You can tell us later, but he's with Allbirds, a B Corporation, and Marshall Lauk from the Bob Woodruff Foundation. And would love to just hear from each one of you first and talk a little bit about what you have been doing and your programs, and then we'll take some questions after that. So Samir, would you mind starting?
Yes, Susan, thanks so much for the kind introduction and welcome everyone. It's a delight to be here with you and speak alongside Eric and Marshall. Once again, my name is Samir Goel, one of the co-founders and co-CEOs there at Isuzu. Happy to share a brief overview of myself, but started my career actually working in the public sector at the United Nations, and so got kind of like the top-down approach to partnerships, really understanding how to kind of curate groups of people together and try to have meaningful dialogues around solving major social issues. That experience kind of led me in the opposite direction though, and I ended up moving towards startups, built a company in the food technology space, and really got that kind of nonprofit NGO perspective as to what it takes to build partnerships and scale organizations through partnerships. And then following that, spent some time in the private sector over at Venture for America, and then over 3 years at LinkedIn, where I spent a lot of time thinking about partnerships from more corporate and business development standpoint. And that kind of leads me to what we do today, which is I'm one of the founders of Isuzu, which is a platform that partners with large multifamily owners and operators to take rental payment data and use it to help people build and establish credit. And so because I know this is a little bit esoteric, typically, renters don't actually get credit for making rent payments on time, yet renters are also, disproportionately low income, disproportionately minorities, disproportionately young people and immigrants. And so that ends up being a major barrier to entry for a lot of people into the American financial system. And so we built the platform where basically bringing together the stakeholders of property managers, tenants, credit bureaus, and regulators to figure out a way to incorporate this data point into the credit system. And on the back of that, launched what we call our Rent Relief Fund, which is a fun partnership that I'll dig into throughout this panel.
Also, I want to mention, I can show your video now.
Yeah,
Samir,
that'd be awesome. Thanks.
Okay, so let me share my screen and I can show a little video that Samir shared with us to kind of better illustrate what it is that Isuzu does.
With essentially no money, no credit identity, and really nowhere to go.
When I got to the United States with my mother, we wanted to borrow money to afford my first year of college. So we borrowed money at over 400% interest rate.
Your credit score is essentially your lifeline in the US financial system. So if you don't have good credit, it's very hard to buy a home.
Home ownership has been the biggest driver of wealth in the United States. But there's a systematic inequality that prevents marginalized folks from getting access to loans. Today, we have an opportunity to right that wrong. We started Isuzu with a simple premise. Your financial identity shouldn't determine where you end up in life.
We work with large multifamily owners and operators to capture rental payment data and report it into the credit bureaus to help tenants build and establish their credit scores. There's currently 45 million Americans that don't have a credit score today. We can unlock over $3 trillion in mortgages.
That in and of itself is not only good for the American economy, it's good for advancing and paving a permanent bridge to financial access and inclusion for everyone.
Our loan provider can look at someone and be like, wow, this person has rented their home for 20 years. I bet they're a really good bet for this mortgage product.
Access to housing is a basic human right. We need to collectively think about how we make sure it is accessible to everyone.
Carrie, is there anything you'd like to add to this video?
You know, I think sorry, say that again, Susan?
Is there anything you'd like to add about your project?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Susan. So the specific project that we worked on is really inspired by COVID. And what we saw is we work with over 200,000 renters across the United States. And when we looked at their finances, we saw that close to 60% of them wouldn't be able to make rent in the wake of the economic crisis that COVID created. And this was back in, March and April, before this became a topic that even, the Senate was talking about. And so what we did was we partnered with some of our existing investors, created a grassroots movement to raise a rent relief fund where we could offer tenants the opportunity to access 0% interest loans with a 3-month grace period and a 12-month repayment, no interest, no fees, no nothing. And the idea behind that was, all we're trying to do here is buy time. Like right now, people lost their jobs, they have medical emergencies, they might not be able to keep a roof over their heads. And if we can give them enough time for a larger federal or government-driven intervention, we can actually save a lot of people from being homeless and being further marginalized, which would set back them, but also the US economy for a long time. And so we partnered with organizations ranging from investors like Acumen Fund to organizations like Target, which helped us deploy local capital in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and a variety of community development financial institutions, and basically leveraged our ecosystem to help institutions deploy capital in a rapid response format, which took a lot of maneuvering and working through bureaucracy, but it was fortunate that we were able to do something particularly in this dire time.
Just also wanted to ask you a little bit about how you have you worked with landlords around this too? And what has the response been? Because this is not typically what you do from a nonprofit end of work. You don't work directly with a landlord, for instance, but if you want to talk a little bit about that, that would be great.
Sure, thanks, Susan. So it's interesting because I think society perpetuates this kind of good guy, bad guy. You have the landlord that's just putting their, foot on tenants, and tenants are just trying to survive. And, in some cases that's true. There are definitely slumlords out there. There are definitely bad landlords. But I think for the most part, landlords are just trying to keep a business alive. They have obligations, they have responsibilities. And if we were to point to a bigger issue, it'd be the structure of, quarterly financial returns. So what we did actually is reach out to our partner network of landlords, because we've worked with these people, we trust them, we have relationships, and we said, hey, we know you're just trying to make ends meet, but you also don't want to be the bad guy during the biggest pandemic we've seen since, like the Spanish flu. And so we actually saw a great reception where landlords are like, this is great. This helps me meet some of my bills, and it also keeps tenants in their homes. And the last thing a landlord really wants to do is kick out a good tenant, right? Like, sure, if you have a drug dealer in your property, you want to get them evicted and do that. But if someone's been paying rent on time and they're hit with an emergency, it costs you a lot more and it's a bigger headache for you to find someone else to fill that vacancy. And so we actually use landlords as our distribution partner. And the way we structured it is we would get a rent roll or a list of tenants from our landlords. We would do all the communication, texts, emails, et cetera, let them know about this opportunity and try to be targeted in terms of, to the best of our ability to understand who is impacted from a job standpoint. And if someone, filled out our short 2-minute application, we were able to approve them, we would use the landlords as a due diligence. So we would talk to the landlord and say, hey, is this tenant really a resident? So make sure there's no fraud. Is their rental not accurate? And, have they been a reasonable tenant? And if so, we then are able to fulfill their rental obligation for 1 to 3 months paid directly to the landlord to ensure that it gets credited towards their rental payments. And so it's been a great win-win. And also I think something that our landlords have been able to kind of rave about to their tenants and, reframe the context.
That's great. How were you able to start so quickly? Because this happened pretty quickly in the pandemic.
I think that's really a product to our core business where our landlords are essentially our clients and tenants are end beneficiaries. And so because we had some of those relationships, we were able to quickly deploy because we're already integrated with their systems. So we actually have APIs built into, or APIs are basically a fancy way of saying a data exchange between property management systems and our platform. And so what that meant is if we go live with a client, all of their tenant information can come to our system and we have the processes to quickly communicate and transfer funds all established. And so, you know, while as a small startup, we can't solve for every single person that needs help with rent in this time, what we were able to see is that we could be the fastest on the ground. And so what we could do is really play that component of speed. Someone needs help right now, we can get them funds potentially within 3 days to cover a couple months of rent. Sometimes it takes longer, but you know, we really tried to do that quickly. And what that does is allow other stakeholders like policymakers and government time to kind of figure out what their program is. And also just generally, I'd say between the difference between what we can do as a startup, right, is faster, better, cheaper, right? And that's kind of the motto we went with is, can we get this money in the hands of people who need it faster than other institutions? Yes. And so that's what we really prioritized.
Perfect. Great. Thank you so much. We'll get back to you, of course, when questions. And just want to encourage everyone who's listening to think about questions for the Q&A session. Thanks, Amir.
Absolutely.
Eric, would you like to speak with us a little bit about the Allbirds project that you actually did with another, it wasn't a competitor, but another fashion company. Maybe you want to talk a little bit first about what Allbirds is and what you do, and a little bit about this specific project.
Sure. I'm actually going to go back a little bit further, if that's all right.
That's absolutely. Please do.
Cool. Well, as an intro, my name is Eric Walski, and I'm the Director of Partnerships and Community Engagement at Allbirds. So happy to be here and representing a retail brand that happens to be a B Corp as well. But just a little background, I started my career in finance. And then somehow at Levi's, I spent a decade there and somehow weaseled my way into marketing by way of a few other positions. And once I got into marketing as somebody with fresh eyes who didn't have a background, I just kind of looked at the world of marketing and just was not that excited about most of it. But what I was excited about is how can we rethink marketing to where it could not only promote what a brand is doing and actually promote brand awareness and sentiment, but also give back to communities. So within that, at Levi's, probably one of the programs that I'm most proud of was the Levi's skateboarding program, where we were approaching an audience that does not like having big brands come into their space, prefers to only work with owned and operated by skateboarder brands. And the way we did that was essentially taking Levi's workwear heritage, taking it to the skate community, and actually building skate parks within underserved communities. And the goal there was tie it back to Levi's as a workwear brand, but also give back to the community and leave something behind. So it wasn't just us coming in and trying to profit off of a community that was very tight and already well established within themselves. That kind of just introduced this whole idea of cause marketing to me, and made it part of my values and part of what I wanted to do with my career. So after leaving Levi's, I ended up at Allbirds a few years later for that reason. It's a company that really does invest in community and wants to continue to do that. And so at Allbirds, two aspects to my job. One is partnerships, so typical brand to brand partnerships, and one is community engagement, of which I see kind of these worlds able to blend a little bit. On the partnership side, again here, just rethinking what a partnership for a brand looks like. Typically in that fashion space, it's all about creating hype, and you partner with a brand that's just going to create the most press and the most buzz, and you drop limited products and people have a hard time getting to them, but it creates this sort of buzzy environment, but it has a little substance at the end of it. And then within that, I guess one of the projects that's a good example is Allbirds is trying to reach a younger audience, trying to get away from just that comfort messaging, which has attracted a slightly older audience, which isn't a bad thing, but you know, we do want to diversify that audience. So we were looking at these younger streetwear brands Now, streetwear, similar to like a skateboarding, they have a very specific point of view on what's cool and what's not cool. And to them, Allbirds is not cool. So how do we come in and do something in an authentic way, authentic to Allbirds, that isn't just us buying into the culture of something that we don't really want to play a part of? The way we did that was we found a brand called Chinatown Market that was interested in doing something interesting. And what we decided to do was not the classic shoe drop, where you put your logos on a product and you sell 500 units and it's really hard to get to them and kids all buy them up and resell them online, because that's not what they want from Allbirds. So the way we did this was took Allbirds materials innovation, which is actually something we're more known for than street style, and we brought that to a company that is really known for street style. And instead of making a shoe with them, we actually brought on a designer named Nicole McLaughlin, who sits in a very hybrid space of fashion, streetwear, and art. And we had her take a bunch of shoes, materials, hardware, things we had just sitting around the office. We sent a couple boxes to her. She created 5 bespoke pieces. We told her to create whatever she wanted. So, and she does crazy things if you have a chance to look her up and follow her. But she created a couple of shoes, she created a couple of bags, a lawn chair. And ultimately, it was all with Allbirds products. We got to speak about sustainability. We got to speak about material innovation. And then Chinatown Market put their logos on it for the audience that they have that just wants anything that says Chinatown Market on it. And so we were able to come and present ourselves to this audience in a way that was validating to what we do and what we stand for, not trying to buy into their culture, and actually speak more to that hybrid consumer who cares about fashion and pays attention to it, but isn't necessarily that kind of hype kid who just wants to buy whatever has the logo on it. So we were able to appeal to that younger audience in a way that didn't really veer us off of the course of what we were already talking about. And I think that that's kind of the bulk of my career in marketing, and what I'd like to continue to do is find those authentic touch points for brands to reach different audiences that have very specific points of view. So yeah, I guess that's the best way I can explain it.
But you also support, thank you, you also support the organizations through this, correct?
Yeah. So the philanthropic side of it is the add-on that I think also further validates it from a value standpoint. And so with that particular project, the items were auctioned off, and all the proceeds went to the Sunshine Project, which is about essentially Sunrise, sorry, which is about organizing young voters to vote on behalf of the environment. So again, bringing it back to things that Allbirds stands for, which for us is really reducing our carbon footprint and reversing the effects of climate change.
Great. Thank you so much.
And I think Eric also wanted to show a video.
I was going to ask. Yeah, good.
Do you want me to introduce it, or oh, you got it?
Oh, sure. Yeah, you can introduce it.
I think this is just the video that it kind of explains the thinking behind the Levi's skateboarding project with a little more illustration and some video so you can kind of see it brought to life.
Skateboarding is a skeptical community, and it's quick to judge. If something is cool, it's cool, you know, and if something doesn't agree with skateboarders or their general essence, then they'll reject it very quickly.
Want to change about my baby.
How do we position Levi's as a credible brand in skateboarding? And how can we support the apparel collection with authentic stories? With Imprint Projects, we set out to continue Levi's long tradition of community engagement with a promise to support skateboarding. This meant building skate parks in the communities that need them most.
Take care of business every night. I want to tell you people, everything's all right.
The key is to work with the community, not just alongside it, to inspire others by telling their stories.
No city has any strength if the young people aren't engaged. And if you can build in front of them, for them, and then also have them part of the process, then they can take ownership on what they have.
To align key marketing efforts, we focus on stories that emerge to the local communities, helping us build their parks. These meaningful stories drive all digital content creation, placing the local community as the stars of each campaign. Real builds are our sets, our skate team are our brand ambassadors, inspiring local skateboarders in the build.
There was no way anyone could hate on it. That's really the only way that a corporate company can get into this industry. If you leave any aspect that's fake or can be torn apart or greedy or whatever, like, we'll find it.
The content that comes out of these projects is being watched by people all over the world. We celebrate our achievements with screenings and events in prominent skateboarding markets like Berlin, Copenhagen, New York, and Los Angeles. From bars to museums to film festivals. I think when you're trying to speak to the skateboarding community, you have to do it in an authentic way that's true to your brand. It's taught us as a brand that you can do something that's not just a commercial campaign.
Leaving something so concrete, literally concrete, is incredible, man.
Once you get that respect, the community that supports you will grow.
Yeah, so I guess just to follow up on that a little bit, so I think a lot of what you heard in there is kind of what I was saying earlier, but also a couple key points there, which is in order to build out that strategy, it had to start with traveling around the globe and speaking to skateboarders, skate shop owners, people within those communities to really understand what was needed. And I think the other element of that is really helpful is that instead of the brand stepping forward and saying, hey, look what we're doing, it was more about taking the people, the community leaders that were actually going to be taking this project on into the future and highlighting them and what they're doing. So it's more about elevation of the individuals in the community versus the elevation of the brand as like the heroes in the story.
Great, thank you so much. We'll come back and talk to you also as well during the Q&A, of course.
Cool.
So we go on to Marshall. Marshall Lauk is with the Bob Woodruff Foundation. And well, you can introduce yourself, of course, and then talk a little bit about your project for veterans, the data tool that you worked on recently.
You bet. Thanks so much, Suzanne. It's great to be here and to see Eric and Samir again. And thanks for the opportunity to share this time with everyone. I'll manage expectations up front. I don't have a fancy video for today. I do share the same fashion-forward hairstyle as Eric, so I do feel good about that. My name is Marshall Lauk. I work at the Bob Woodruff Foundation, leading up our growth and marketing efforts. If you're not familiar with our foundation, our founder, Bob Woodruff, is still a reporter for ABC. And in 2006, he was badly wounded while embedded with US forces in Iraq. And he and his family started the foundation during his recovery to help ensure that not only veterans, but their families had all the support they needed after they left service. So as they returned to communities around the country, that's our work. My checkered past involves first about 7 years in the Marine Corps. And when I left the Marine Corps, I went in search of the next best thing, the most fulfilling pursuit that I could find after that. And where else would I go but Kraft Foods to be a packaged goods marketer? But like Eric, I was not a classically trained marketer and wanted to learn the trade. And so I had a great experience at Kraft managing a number of brands. Before I moved to the agency side, I spent about 12 years there, managing both clients and offices in one of the specialty practices at what was previously J. Walter Thompson. And a lot of our focus of effort was on recruitment advertising. We did a lot of work. I had an interesting opportunity then to be on the other side of things and essentially help market and sell a product that I had bought some number of years before. So it's just a really fascinating opportunity for me to test my ability as a marketer there. One of the things that helped me start doing was get involved in the nonprofit space. If you think about the time that we were marketing the military to young people, it was during the height of the conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan. And so it was very important for us to recognize we were asking a lot of young people making that decision. We also needed to be doing everything we could to help them as they completed their service. So I started consulting to a number of veteran nonprofits. And about 3 years ago, I moved over full-time to the Bob Woodward Foundation, one of the ones that I consulted to over time. So just a great opportunity for me to lace my boots up again and help out. And the partnership we're going to talk about today that we've embarked on, truly kind of a multi-dimensional effort. It started as our effort to build the largest network outside of the VA to support veterans at the local level. Because that's really, when you get down to it, when people leave military service, whether it's after 4 years or 40, they don't go home to the VA, they don't go home to a nonprofit, they go home to a community or a town or a city. And there's a huge range in terms of how well communities were prepared to take in veterans and support them. So we decided we would address that gap by really pulling together thousands of organizations out there around the country supporting veterans, not just nonprofits, but for-profit companies, other volunteer organizations, city governments, any program out there that supported vets. So we built this network. It's probably over 3,000 organizations now. And one of the things we realized is we needed a really strong kind of data-driven way to understand two things. First, what do veterans need down at the local level? How does that differ from city to city, state to state? And then what was the capacity of those communities to actually meet those needs? There wasn't an existing data set. So we went to Craig Newmark, the founder of Craigslist, who has a large philanthropic group called Craig Newmark Philanthropies, and asked if he would support us in building the first of its kind data tool to help us generate solid information from the local level. So with Craig's support and the partnership of the National League of Cities, the Collective Impact Forum, and RAND, we built a data tool that allows us to survey these community collaboratives around the country and pull data from them about the needs that their veterans present with, the capacity to meet those needs, and whether or not those two things match, which is really our goal of bringing those two things together so we could make grassroots level philanthropy and support that last mile as effective as possible.
Great. Thank you. Do you want to add anything, or should we go back to the questions?
We can go right to questions, and I'm happy
Okay.
to add. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you something first, and then I'll go back to Eric and something here. But because we talked about this and also talking about pivoting in the pandemic, many nonprofits and foundations and others focus on so many other different things. And then the pandemic hits, and maybe there will be challenges there. I just wonder if there have been any, how has the last 6 months, say 7 months, I guess we're in this pandemic now, but has it changed? Has it been challenges there, or has it changed the project at all for you?
Yeah, absolutely, Suzanne. I mean, there's no question the pandemic had an immediate impact. What's interesting is if there's any way to look at finding opportunity to help people within this very troubling time, the pandemic presented that for us. It actually allowed us to apply what we had drawn from this data tool almost immediately and really for its intended purpose. So, as you know, like, how could we implement our learnings immediately, or almost stress test this thing we had built? When the pandemic hit, we had a full wave of survey data that we had generated. So we immediately said, all right, we've got a window into directly what's going on. We have our partnership with with Craig Newmark Philanthropies, also it allowed us to bring on a fellow. So we had a PhD level epidemiologist and data scientist on staff who immediately took our data set, appended it with a couple of others. And I think we were a week and a half into April, so really very early stage. We published the first paper of its kind with data-driven results on, and I try to specify here so I don't speak out of turn. We talked about the implications of COVID for the veteran community. They were the non-health implications.
Mm-hmm.
What issues were going to hit the veteran community hardest as a result of the pandemic? So we immediately said, okay, we've got a window into this. We can help everyone who is thinking like, what do I do? There's so much outpouring of support, all these organizations, how do I help? What can I do for vets? Let me throw time and money at this. Our goal was to say, if you're going to put resources against it, put them here. And we called out the first 3 or 4 main issues. And certainly employment was an obvious one, but we put data behind it. For example, we showed the 5 hardest hit industries based on COVID had a disproportionate number of veterans employed in those industries relative to others. So we knew it was going to be a double hit. Social isolation and mental health results. One of the things we deal with in our community is the best thing for you to avoid COVID is the worst thing for you if you're grappling with social isolation issues and mental health.
Right, of course.
So really just, to tie that up, we tried not to see this as anything other than it was. If not an opportunity, it was an imperative. Like we were duty bound to take this information, employ it immediately, and try to help others who were coming into the space to invest where it would help most.
That's great. Thank you so much. Samir, I want to ask you a question. You've been very successful. If you can unmute your microphone also. So you've been you guys have been very successful. This happened very fast and you got a lot of press for this too. Forbes magazine, among others. So this has gone fast and it's been successful. Were there any challenges at all? Could you mention one? And what did you do to overcome it?
Yeah, Susan, that's a really good question. So I think when we started this, right, it really was just an idea that was somewhere in the back of our heads, right? There's nothing. So I think the hardest part was taking something that conceptually sounds great, which is getting money into the hands of renters that have lost their jobs or have a family member that's been medically impacted by COVID. But the actual logistics and tactics around that is really difficult. And it's also very hard. I know a lot of the folks on this call represent big foundations and such. It's very hard to get kind of startup capital for a philanthropic effort. That takes time, that takes relationship building. And so I think 2 things. One is that, in some ways we were blessed with COVID in the sense that all these meetings, all this travel, all this stuff that would normally kill our calendars was just no longer relevant. And so we were able to actually take some time to really deeply think about how we could execute this. And, I guess as you do in building a startup, like creating new ideas quickly and testing them is just a competency that's really core to what you do every day. So that was helpful. I think what we realized though is that we were never going to be able to get the kind of scale or funding or even press coverage that we wanted if we didn't have some proof of concept that this was one needed and important. And so we really did 2 things. One was we launched a grassroots crowdfunding campaign and, just went to our communities, people we know, et cetera, and we're able to raise over $30,000 in a few days. And it was just, full steam ahead, social media messaging people at 3 a.m., emailing donors, emailing friends, emailing really trying to get, small local news coverage and just getting something so that we could show, hey, this is an idea that's really galvanizing the public. It's not just, something that's in our heads. And then 2 was really to show the demand, so to speak, or really more acutely the need from a tenant standpoint. And so we actually put up our website and basically just told our landlords we had built this fund without necessarily having all the capital for it. They started distributing it. And we were like, you know what, if we need to, we'll just like take out loans in our personal name or whatever we need to do to just start doing this and just like show that this works and that this is a real need. And, to date, we've had over $10 million worth of rental applications. We still don't have the total funds needed to meet all that demand. But what we were able to do then was go back to our philanthropic partners and say, hey, I know that you weren't really excited about this a month ago, but now one, we have a bunch of grassroots donors that validate that this is something that people want to spend money on. And two, you can really seize demand here. And it's not, and it was like something that could apply to everyone. It wasn't just, there's a lot of demand in New York City. It was nationwide. We were getting, inbound everywhere. We were getting calls from national healthcare providers like, Anthem or Blue Cross or whatever. And they would literally be sending people who had medical emergencies to Isuzu saying, we can't actually help you right now, but maybe you can get rent relief from Isuzu. And we're, small New York-based, Harlem-based organization with 25 people. There's clearly something big here. And so I think the challenge was just getting that kind of initial validation or proof of concept. And we just kind of had to take a little bit of a leap of faith to build out that concept.
Great. Thank you. Just wanted to add also to everyone that you can also start adding your questions. So bring in your questions to this. So thanks, Samir. We'll get back to you. I also want to ask Eric about any challenges, especially with Chinatown market. Were there any challenges in-house? When you start collaborating outside your organization, and in this case, you also collaborated with another fashion brand. Did you have any challenges internally there?
Oh yeah, nothing but.
Good. I'm so glad I asked.
How much time do we have?
Yeah.
I'd say that in a for-profit company, when you're trying to do collaborations and projects that are philanthropic in nature, the three scariest letters are ROI. And I would say, the challenges typically are direct lines from a spreadsheet or from a creative department internally.
Right.
And so creative departments don't really want to let go of the creative work and allow somebody outside of the company to take hold of it, or allow me to take hold of it, as an example. Right. And then on the ROI side, a lot of these programs that are more philanthropic in nature are a little bit harder to measure, and it's not a direct dollar for dollar spend in return. And so there's a bit of a leap of faith, as well as a trust in the halo effect of these types of programs. Specific to Chinatown Market, I think one of the challenges early on internally is just developing trust and ensuring that everybody from the founders on down trust your work, trust your thinking, and that allows you to, I guess, go a little bit autonomously into these programs. And then, in terms of working with an outside partner, just so many challenges. Chinatown Market, super small, super scrappy company, very like DIY driven. They create things in their own warehouse on a regular basis. They don't have timelines. They don't really do meetings. It's just, it's like coming from this very formal environment and jumping into this total chaos that works for them just fine, but really hard for us to, I guess, keep them on track and get them to understand that we have true timelines and deadlines. We have a million stories to talk about, and this fits into this window, and we're outside of that window. We're no longer able to talk about it effectively. So it's just a lot of back and forth, a lot of emails and meetings to just get things aligned. And it's just kind of like the whole like herding cats type thing with the external partner.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I could go on and on about, internal difficulties with these types of programs, because it isn't something that translates to everybody. And when you get into like performance marketing and talking to those folks, like they really don't get it. Product teams that manage margin really don't understand what you're doing. Why are you only creating 2,000 of these, and why are they only getting a 25% margin or whatever it is, So it's a lot of politicking internally.
Yeah. And I think this is not unusual within the nonprofit organizations either, or foundations. Anyone who does work like this and who tries to do something new considers a lot of other organizations competitors, unfortunately. But I think times call for much more collaborations like this. So, but it's good to hear that you overcame all those hurdles. So. Yeah. Okay. That's great. Yeah. Well, you were successful, right? You haven't overcome them yet.
Yeah. I mean, I think you have to find the right company as well. And I think the collaboration that we're doing with Adidas is a really good sign as to the thinking behind just Allbirds in general, and how they're thinking about their role in this whole retail environment, as well as their role in climate change. And Adidas and Allbirds should not, by any rules, be partnering with each other. We both make shoes. We both make sneakers. We just launched a running shoe. Like, it just shouldn't work that way. But I think what it was that we're small, but we have a lot of innovation and a lot of information and a lot of expertise. And Adidas has some expertise that we don't have right now. And bringing those things together to take this idea of getting the lowest carbon footprint athletic shoe out there in the world, they're interested in doing that because they're going to learn from it, and they know their audience is going to continue to ask them for this. And we're interested in it because we need to get our story and message out there that you can do things in a better way. And somehow, two leaders in those organizations were able to come together in more of like a socialist type approach and say, like, what's the greater good here? The greater good is solving this problem for the world. And if every company stopped acting like competitors and keeping their information so tightly held to themselves and open sourced it, we could all be doing a better job at this. So I think there's potentially a shift, or I'm hoping there's a shift in the way that for-profit corporations are thinking about how we do this, how we tackle this.
Yeah, that's great. And anyone who works on partnerships knows that building trust is really the key. And then how you do it and how long it takes, that's a question, right? Okay. So that's always going to be an issue. Yeah. Great, thank you so much. Yeah. Marshall, I want to ask you a little bit about what your thinking is as far as, we talked about the pandemic. What do you think is going to happen in the next year, so 6 months to a year, in this field, and especially where you are?
Absolutely. I think I think for the early part of this, everyone was kind of working week to week and using markers out there like, oh, Memorial Day, Veterans Day, back to school, or I'm sorry, Labor Day. And I think
the whole world did. We did too in Europe. Absolutely. We were ready for this. Yeah.
We're confronting the fact that the effects of this are going to be with us for the long haul. And now how do we adjust or even pivot again? Our focus now is really like, over the summer, over the last 90 days, we used the data that came out of this relationship and some of this partnership to grant about $6 million out to organizations. We had already 5 times that need in applications just over the summer. So this is going to be with us for the foreseeable future. And we've moved from things like emergency support to more like sustainable impact. That's really what we're trying to do, in part because in the nonprofit world, at least in our category, probably 2/3 of the nonprofits out there are operating with less than a fiscal quarter's worth of capital. So we're looking at real potential erosion in the infrastructure that's there. And a lot of times nonprofits exist to fill gaps not filled by for-profit, government, and other organizations.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, there's a bit of this, like we're trying to, is there a canary in the coal mine here that we need to be watching for? Can we create sustained impact? And then can we use the partnership to go back out and get another round of data this fall to tell us where to focus our efforts in the coming year? Because our issue, and I'm sure others are facing it, some of the progress that's been made in our space over years has been undone in a matter of months. Veteran unemployment's a great example. Below the national average before the pandemic, now we're at twice the pre-pandemic level, and that took 6 months versus 15 years to get it right. This has been a complex partnership. We've drawn on other philanthropists, other for-profit and research organizations, and a whole host of community-based actors who have their own things to worry about, and try to be a resource to them that adds value, adds capacity, but doesn't take their eye off the ball, if that helps a little bit.
Right. That's great. Thank you. I want to be cognizant of our time. Jen, how are we doing with questions from anyone?
If anyone has any questions, please drop them in the comments. I didn't see, I've seen a lot of praise. I've seen a lot of hoorahs for Marshall.
That's great.
If anyone has any questions they'd like to drop in, That would be great. I do have a question. I guess I can pose this to everyone, but you know, it's hard. The more partners you bring in, the more difficult the execution is going to be. But like we've seen with these partners, the more worth it and the more impactful it is. Would you say what I would like to hear from panelists, kind of what makes a good partner and what kind of keeps them motivated in forming these multidimensional cross collaborations with competitors and with other people sort of outside of their immediate sphere?
That's a great question. Anyone want to jump in first?
Sure. I'm sure it's different for all of us, given that we all have different fields. But in terms of what makes a good partner, from like a brand to brand side of things, it always starts with values alignment. I think there needs to be a shared purpose for it to really make sense. Consumers are so good at spotting fakes now and spotting like what really doesn't make sense and what's forced and what's paid for versus authentically integrated in a partnership. So it's always starting with values, and then I think that it's that that mutual trust that we were talking about. And that comes in like actually showing your cards and sharing and understanding where the future of each brand is going to ensure that it's not only valid for now but valid for the future. I think in community partnerships, in the other side of my job, it's very similar. You just sort of sub-brand with an individual or an organization there, and it is really like truly having a vision. So an example within the skate parks, K-Dub, who was in the video talking, it was basically meeting with him and walking around the neighborhood with him and seeing how the people in the neighborhood interacted with him. He was just, you could tell he was a presence. You could tell that all the kids loved him. You could tell that even just as we walked around the blocks in the neighborhood, everybody said what's up to him. And he was just a figure that I felt like really was accountable to that community. And it made it super easy just seeing that to partner with him. So yeah, for me, it's like values and authenticity.
Great, thank you. Samir?
Yeah, thanks, Suzanne. And actually, it's funny, I would say I doubled down on something that Eric had said earlier, which regarding the Allbirds and Adidas partnership, where, it sounded like both of them had their own superpower, right? And I think you want to, when you're creating a partnership, obviously values and vision, but then the other thing that I've found is like, you want to make sure that each partner has like a real kind of purpose where together you're doing something that individually you couldn't. And I feel like there's a lot of partnerships that are done that are really kind of off the shelf to hit numbers, right? It's just like referral marketing, or we're just post content on LinkedIn. But I think when there's really something that both organizations do that's a different competency, but merged together is really powerful. Kind of a very easy way to think about it in our case was we had the proximity to the renter and the tenant, and we understood what was happening, and we could, because of our data, see what was happening kind of ahead of the curve and address it quickly. What we didn't have was access to, capital or brand dollars. And so there's like a very clear kind of delineation there. And I think that was really helpful. The other thing that I'll say is, speaking of trust, sometimes it just comes down to the specific stakeholder you're working with. And it's funny because organizations turn over a lot. So you'll have different people you work with, but with the example of Target Foundation, the stakeholder we work with is actually someone we had built a partnership with in our previous role 2 or 3 years ago. And while the work we were able to do together there never really materialized into anything too significant, she came into Target Foundation, had kind of a new role overseeing their financial health portfolio from a philanthropic dollar standpoint. And it was like very well timed where we had already kind of built that trust. So I just say, think about relationships as kind of extending beyond a specific brand or the partner. You never really know how it comes around, but sometimes it just ends up that one-on-one.
Yeah, and so often it has to do with the relationship, really, and relationship can take years to build, and you never know. Like someone said here earlier today, and another presenter said, you never know who's going to be, where this person that you meet with is going to be some other time. So you never know. You can help each other.
Yeah. And I think that's what makes integrity so important. When you do have a partnership, don't take on, more than you can handle. I think I've definitely made the mistake, but I've also seen very often you just sign up a partner to sign up a partner, and that just dilutes the power of working alongside you. I'd rather do less done better in that regard.
Thank you. Marshall, what makes it?
Absolutely. I think what I've found really interesting is something I tried to bring from the for-profit world, and it seems counterintuitive in the foundation space, because I know we'd all like to have people just hand us a check with no strings attached and call it a day. But I think our best partners are the ones that come with their own expectations and a real bias for results. They want to see impact, and they have, as Samir noted, they bring their own core competency to this. So the partners, this work we're doing with Craig and Rand and Collective Impact Forum, you're talking 5 different partners, all with a core competency, all better together, and all with very clear expectations of what they want to get out of it. National League of Cities gave us unprecedented access to elected officials at the local level, where we could really reach down and figure out what localities could do. And they had an expectation that we brought that data back, and we brought back best practice, and we helped them build their individual localities' capacity to support. So I would say, for us, it's been partners that show up, not just with resources, but with expectations, and they're ready to get down to work.
I agree. That's good. Thank you. Jen, how are we doing on time?
Good. We just have one more question that I from Hope for Eric. With all the potential partners, how was the decision to pursue Adidas? Besides your CEOs, was there any filter or criteria for choosing to partner with Adidas?
Yeah, I think Samir, you kind of nailed it with talking about the competencies of both sides of the relationship, and that is such a key component. And I think with the Adidas partnership, it's really a lot about that as well. So a lot of partnerships do happen because you met somebody. It wasn't so much that we were cold calling Adidas or vice versa. It was the fact that Tim and this guy James, who leads some of the U.S. business at Adidas, started having a conversation, and it always becomes a question of what if. And I think they shared a passion for fighting climate change. Adidas knows that they need to update their gigantic system to better support those efforts, and just felt like this type of partnership could really one, bring awareness to it, but also actually have real impact. And so, I think through conversations, and then as the rest of us were kind of brought into those conversations, it came down to just that. It's like we both had a shared goal in bringing this to life, and what its purpose would be, and the fact that we both brought something to the table to support the other, and also just thinking about how you could take these great minds from both sides and bring them together to create something that otherwise probably wouldn't have happened. So I don't know if that fully answers it, but it really is that combination of values and authenticity and trust, and then of course bringing something to the table that supports the other.
Great, thank you. If anyone has anything to add, now would be the time. Any panelists who want to talk about something that we haven't touched on? If not, I want to thank everyone, Samir, Marshall, and Eric, for this time. I've learned a lot, and I appreciate that. I hope everyone else who listened learned something as well. We just showed 3 examples of very different kind of partnerships, from corporations and the younger startup to a more established foundation. But everyone is doing innovating things and having multidimensional partnerships. So I've learned a lot. So I want to thank you. I also want to thank everyone who's listening, of course, and checking in. And thanks, Jen and Cost Marketing Summit, for having all of us today.
Thank you for
Thanks.
all our panelists across the U.S. and on the East Coast. So thank you for joining. So I'm really excited to introduce our next presenter here. Nina Robbins is spearheading a really incredible agency called FYI, who Jackie Fletcher, who we've probably met during this whole situation, actually was a part of starting it. So it was really a amazing network. I started working with Jackie and with FYI back when I was doing outreach for the WIC program. So helping underserved women, infants, and children and families get access to healthy food and exercise. And FYI helped us install 10 screens in 10 different locations, reaching 40,000 plus families throughout New York City. I don't know if other nonprofits have run into this, but sometimes when you ask advertisers, or if you're trying to reach a certain demographic and you ask, how many low-income people do you have who watch your program or listen to your program? Usually they clam up and won't share, but FYI is one of those networks that reaches a really unique population, diverse population throughout New York City. And they also provide free services for nonprofits who are trying to get the word out about their important causes. So Nina Robbins, I'll let you take it away and tell us more about your work and how nonprofits and for-profits now can tap into what you're doing.
Thank you. Hello, cause marketers. So Jen, thank you for that live testimonial. There's nothing better than that. So my name is Nina Robbins, and I'm the program director of FYI, and I'm thrilled to be able to speak at this year's virtual summit. I'm a big fan of Jen's and have been an attendee of the summit for the past few years. And it always stands out to me, I'm sure as it does to you too, as one of my favorite events of the year, where you really do discover new insights and participate in meaningful discussions about the most relevant issues of the day. So before we get started, by a show of claps, so I hope everybody at this point knows where their clap emoji is, how many of you think that advertising isn't accessible for your organization? I don't know how to see how many claps there are, but.
I'll take a look at the claps. I don't see anything yet.
I don't see any claps. Then you guys are set. Oh, there's one. Okay, well, we got one clap. Well, I'm here to prove you wrong, and then the rest of you obviously have figured this out already. But my next question is, and this would be interesting to note, out of all of you that work for nonprofits, how many of you have seen your marketing budgets cut in half, or even worse, cut completely? I know that's not something necessarily to clap for, but I think positive reactions are the only option on Zoom. So yes, definitely claps and thumbs up on that one. So, well, you know, that's a lot of claps, not too many, but hopefully this will be valuable to all of you. As we all know, the nonprofit community right now is kind of facing a perfect storm. Organizations are seeing ballooning demand for services and sinking revenues. And marketing is often the first budget item on the chopping block, even though communications is key to helping nonprofits achieve their missions. So I'm here to tell you that advertising is not out of reach, and share some information on FYI's unique offerings, as well as some examples of some of our strategic partnerships and models for strategic partnerships that hopefully will spark some ideas about how you can also create newsworthy campaigns in an affordable and effective way. So you may be asking yourself, who is FYI? I have not heard of them before. Well, FYI is a full-service nonprofit advertising group that's based in New York. And we work exclusively with other nonprofits, government agencies, and social enterprises to help them build public awareness about resources that are available to people in need, and also raise awareness and generate action on issues of public concern. And what's really unique about FYI is that we are also a public charity ourselves. So we have it in our DNA to understand the needs of the nonprofit community. And in addition to that, every dollar in revenue that we generate goes right back into subsidized advertising solutions for New York's social impact sector. A little bit about our history, which Jackie should be in charge of this slide. FYI was established 15 years ago in 2005. It's our 15th anniversary by a group of philanthropists who realized that many great nonprofits could better engage New Yorkers in need of their services. And the group realized that nonprofits were great at service delivery, but didn't have the capacity or budget to advertise their value to the greater public. And FYI was created as an affordable advertising solution that would leverage nonprofit physical and digital spaces to create a community-driven advertising platform that reaches our most vulnerable and enables nonprofits to advertise their programs and services for free, which is oftentimes the only way that nonprofits can get the word out, especially in a high-priced media market like New York. So Jackie, I don't know if your video is on, I can't see you, but I just want to give a shout out to Jackie, which Jen already did, but Jackie Fletcher, who all of you know now because you've been in this marketing summit, Cause Marketing Summit, is she's the founding director of program director of FYI. And she's now on our advisory committee and was instrumental in getting the organization off the ground. So she introduced me to Jen and the Cause Marketing Summit. So I just wanted to give a quick shout out to Jackie. And I don't know if that was a revisionist history. Jackie, if you want to add something, now's the time. I think you're muted, so I'm not sure. But I just wanted to give a shout out to you. So moving on. So a little bit about our services. So we began as a community media distribution platform and organically grew into a full service agency to meet other marketing and communications needs of our clients. And now we help our clients build stronger brand awareness and implement low cost and no cost outreach campaigns through a variety of services, including creative services, photography, animation, illustration, graphic design. And we offer those services through our growing Impact Artist Collective, which is comprised of artists from all walks of life who want to devote their time and their talent to nonprofits at affordable rates. And for clients that do have some budget, we offer strategic media buying services that optimize really every dollar of ad spend. So I know many nonprofits here probably have never thought about media buying to reach a larger audience, especially some of the smaller organizations, but there are affordable options. And FYI has longstanding relationships with for-profit media companies that give us access to highly discounted rates that we then pass on to our clients. So a little bit about our track record. So since 2005, we've served 120 social impact clients that engage in direct service and advocacy for vulnerable populations, civic engagement, environmental justice, social justice, and so much more. And you can actually, and I'll put the link in the chat after the presentation, but you can peruse our PSA gallery online to get a sense of the diverse array of issues that we focus on and the clients we serve. Over time, we've distributed 198 campaigns and saved New York's nonprofit community over $9 million in media distribution costs through our community PSA network, but also through media donations and discounted rates. So a little bit more about this PSA network that I've been talking about. It's the cornerstone service that really sets FYI apart from the crowd. And we've developed this community-owned and community-driven advertising platform called the PSA Network. And it consists of indoor and outdoor digital billboards that are strategically placed in high-traffic community spaces like public health clinics and community centers and food pantries and senior centers. And you can see a few pictures of some of the assets in our network here. And then you can also see the map of all of our locations throughout New York City and Westchester. And basically by leveraging nonprofit communities' collective real estate, we've been able to create a homegrown media offering that provides the nonprofit community power over their marketing and a free citywide messaging channel that reaches, again, the most vulnerable New Yorkers across the city. So by pooling our resources together, organizations don't have to depend on Facebook or Twitter or Clear Channel to get the word out, since we can really depend on each other. And what's more is that while we offer this channel for free to nonprofits, we actually decided that we were going to put a price point on it for government clients. Since government will pay for-profit clients for advertising, why wouldn't they pay a nonprofit media company? And so we've instituted this revenue model that's actually a revenue share model that gives a portion of any ad revenue generated through government marketing directly to the nonprofit that's advertising that message. So we're hoping to actually turn this collective media cooperative into a new revenue stream for the nonprofits that we work with. You may be thinking to yourself, how did you reach New Yorkers while the city was on pause? And that's a very good question. Since COVID-19 hit, many of our locations, especially the ones that serve older adults, have been closed. But it actually forced us to grow and identify new ways to reach our audience of vulnerable New Yorkers. So now, in addition to advertising on digital billboards housed at our partner sites, we also have created processes for making sure that they're displaying our PSAs on their social media accounts and e-newsletters and all the other digital owned media channels. Last, I want to let you know that if you are in the New York area and you're interested in joining the media cooperative, we're always looking for new partners. And even better, we can help you secure grant. I saw one hand raised. We can help you receive grant funding for up to 85% of the cost of obtaining and installing your own digital billboard. So definitely get in touch if that's something you want to discuss in more detail. So you might also be asking, what kinds of messages do we advertise through our community media cooperative? And the criteria for a message is really that it must defend or empower a vulnerable population, a community-driven effort, an environmental resource, and/or our democracy. And it should be noted that we don't allow fundraising messages on the network, primarily because it's supposed to be the connective tissue that connects people in need directly with the services available to them. And also, fundraising messages shared and displayed in front of low-income New Yorkers it's not necessarily the target audience you'd be looking for anyways. So here are some examples of the social impact advertisements that we distributed throughout this year. And again, you can look at our PSA gallery if you're interested. We've just launched a voting initiative. So if you're looking for fresh voter content that you want to put on social or your e-newsletter, we're constantly adding new voting content that reaches populations that historically have low voter turnout rates. So please check that out if you're interested in finding voter content. But as you can see, the digital PSA network is used to bring attention to nonprofits that are working on a diverse range of issues, from climate change to police accountability, to tenants' rights, to food security, racial discrimination, immigrants' rights, public health, and so much more. And it actually enables our nonprofit partners that house these digital billboards to provide access to vital information on a wide range of quality of life issues, as well as information on new laws and policies, and the individual rights that we should feel comfortable and confident exercising in our democracy. So you may also ask, how do we pick these organizations that get to advertise for free on our network? And we do it, it's really a two-sided coin. So organizations with an important message come to us, and we share it with our network. But we also work with our partners to get a better understanding of what the needs they're seeing on the ground are. And then we reach out to organizations that we trust that are working on those issues to offer them free media space on the network. So it works both ways. But again, if you are working on a campaign and you're trying to shout it from the highest skyscraper in New York, we can help you do that. So now I'm going to shift to speaking about some of the campaigns we recently spearheaded, focused on one of the key civic issues of the year and really the decade, which is the census. I'm going to do a quick plug for the census. I'm sure all of you know how important it is, but even if there's one of you that doesn't, hopefully this is useful. So the census is a constitutionally mandated population count of every resident, documented and undocumented, in the United States. And the data from the census is used to determine allocation of federal funding for schools, hospitals, roads, and community services, as well as political representation in the House of Representatives. It only takes 2 minutes to complete, and right now many states, including New York, are facing a severe undercount, which will mean that these states, including New York, won't have federal funding they need to support schools and hospitals. And in fact, we're currently, it's looking like we're going to lose 1 or 2 congressional seats in the House of Representatives as well. So please, I beg you to encourage everyone you know to take the census and explain to them why it's as important as voting in this upcoming election. So now I've done my plug for the day. And I'll talk about a few strategic partnerships that we led that were very affordable and helped us get out the count in innovative and strategic ways. So when you're on a really limited budget and you need to find partners that are mission aligned, and you also need to find partners that bring a unique strength to the campaign. I believe Samir said your superpower, and I think that's a really great way to put it. So a campaign is always based on a strong creative, access to advertising inventory that reaches your target audience, and then of course press, all the press you can possibly get. And the biggest challenge with the census is that your target audience is everybody. So with a limited budget, how do you advertise to everyone in New York City when you don't have like Michael Bloomberg's presidential campaign budget? And you know, obviously, I think you figured out by looking at our slide the vehicle, pun intended, that we chose. But one way to reach every single block of New York City is garbage trucks. So we first approached the Department of Sanitation through a mutual partner to see if they'd be interested in working with us on this initiative, which of course they are mission aligned, they're a government agency. And we were actually able to secure the space free of cost, which was a really big win. So it was a fleet of 2,500 sanitation trucks that reached every street in New York City. And while we were doing that, we wanted to approach a creative partner that could provide some star power. And we thought Sesame Street's Oscar the Grouch and The Count would be a great celebrity duo to introduce a census message and attract the attention of parents and kids. And as we all know, kids are sometimes the best messengers and motivators for parents. So maybe you wouldn't be surprised, but getting to Oscar the Grouch is as hard, probably maybe not as hard, but it's like getting to Beyonce. It's not easy. And when we didn't have a relationship with Sesame Street, it took a lot of perseverance. So we, for probably like 3 months, contacted everybody we knew and got every email, and, you know, sometimes played the email guessing game just to get this message across that, you know, we wanted to work with them. And I think the way we framed it was actually key in saying that we have this donated media space. We would love for you to create a message, but this is for you for free. So, you know, that's offering Sesame Street a space on 2,500 trucks. We were hoping that that would be the carrot. And it turns out that eventually we found the right person at the right time. And Sesame Street was already working with the Census Bureau on a campaign, so a national campaign. So this really fit nicely into their work stream, which is also key to a successful partnership. And they provided this amazing creative with the fun message, make your family count, even the Grouches, free of cost. So that was also donated to us. And then the last piece of this puzzle was the PR. Obviously, Sesame Street is one of the most revered and trusted brands in the world, and they have national PR covered, but we wanted to cover our bases and identify a local partner that had a vested interest in making the campaign a splash. So we were able to get some great local coverage for the campaign because we included New York City Census in the project, and that's part of the mayor's team. And I think what was helpful was that we didn't approach them until the project was really mature. So when we had 80% of our ducks in a row, we approached them and they were on board. And we allowed them obviously to include their name in exchange for some extra support on the PR front. So the campaign was up for 2 flights in March and May, reaching every block in New York City. It was seen by millions. And garbage trucks actually turned out to be the best vehicle during COVID-19 because people were not commuting to work, but they were still walking around their neighborhoods doing necessary tasks like going to the grocery store. So we were lucky that we chose this vehicle. But we We hope that the campaign moved the census count up a percentage point or two, but data collection for out-of-home media, especially print out-of-home, is difficult to track, especially when you have a limited budget. But whenever we mention the campaign to a client or friend, they always say, oh yeah, I saw those. So while that's anecdotal, it makes us feel like the campaign did have an impact. And all in all, in addition to our own labor in putting this partnership together, we spent a total of $8,000 to reach every single New Yorker, get a celebrity spokesgrouch, and some great media hits as well. So the $8,000 was just for the production, for the printing of the posters. So I'm here to tell you that it is possible to do a citywide campaign in New York in an affordable way. I'll talk about another census campaign that we did. This was a really fun one. Our second campaign was actually a fortune cookie campaign. We placed 2020 census slogans and 13 million fortune cookies that were distributed by Chinese restaurants throughout New York City. And this campaign was also built on the same three pillars, right? So compelling creative, innovative messaging inventory, and a PR partner that could bring attention to the initiative, which in this case was the Manhattan Borough President's Office. So again, similarly, we reached out to partners we have in the Chinese community, a lot of nonprofits that we work with, to ask if they knew a fortune cookie manufacturer, and sure enough, somebody knew somebody who knew somebody that did. And again, being introduced through a community partner goes a long way when building new relationships, and we were able to make a direct connection with decision makers at Wonton Foods, which happens to be the largest fortune cookie manufacturer in the United States, and also has their first manufacturing plant the first one they established in Brooklyn. So they also had a vested interest in making sure there was a complete count of this in the census, since census data really impacts investments and business decisions as well. So we pitched the idea, and they took us up on it, and they offered us the fortune cookies at cost, which was an incredible, it was basically a donation, but there was some cost, as well as the distribution. And for the creative, we decided that we would partner with our nonprofits that are part of our community media cooperative through a 2020 census slogan contest, because who doesn't want to see their own slogan in a fortune cookie when they order Chinese food? So we saw it as an opportunity to connect and engage with our partners in a fun way, and to keep the census top of mind for organizations across New York City. So some of the winning slogans you can see here, but some of the other ones, one here is "Don't count calories, be counted." The other was like "Eat me, then be counted" in the 2020 census. "You are, therefore you count," and some other, there were about 29 other pithy sayings. And I ordered Chinese food, and I got one of these census fortune cookies. So it was really exciting when you saw it happen, at your own home. And for the PR component, we reached out to the Manhattan Borough President's Office in a similar way when the idea was mature and the partnership, again, had 80% of our ducks in a row. And they put together a press conference for us in Chinatown to launch the campaign. And by having a partner that has deep relationships with the press and making them the face of the campaign, it really can help you broaden your reach tremendously. And you can see a picture of Julie Menon and Gail Brewer and some other big community leaders in this picture during the press conference. Unfortunately, when we planned to launch the campaign, COVID came. So many restaurants were closed, which meant that we had to put the campaign on hold, and we were worried that we might never launch. But as New York began to reopen, we really saw an opportunity to use this campaign as a way to both encourage people to take the census, but also to encourage New Yorkers to patronize their local Chinese restaurants and support the Chinese community, which continues to experience a surge of xenophobia and to be hit hardest by the pandemic. So by framing it in that light, I think we also were able to make it attractive for the press. So in total, this campaign cost us $10,000, and in addition to our own labor costs. And the self-response rate for the city increased the most out of any other city in the US between the beginning of May and mid-August, which lines up with our efforts. And we think we help push those numbers up during this period. So, so we were really excited about this one. One last census campaign. I promise we do other things, but this has been the priority for us. So in our final census effort, which launched this month, was a civic art challenge. And we asked purpose-driven artists that are part of our collective, as well as artists that came about through a partnership with Creative Action Network, to put their talent to work for the census. And you can see some of the winning designs here, including one with Cardi B and one with our fortune cookie in it. So the winning submissions were printed as postcards and posters and distributed to all of our community media cooperative partners, and included in emergency food packages being delivered to New Yorkers in need throughout New York City. So I want to mention who our partners were. Again, in terms of the creative, finding a great partner with a superpower, we found Creative Action Network. And if you don't know them, they basically crowdsource art for mission-driven campaigns and sell that art online. And a portion of the revenue goes to supporting the artists. So we really love that model. So we received some submissions through them, as well as members of our Impact Artist Collective. And then again, the distribution was donated because we basically relied on our community partners to include the posters and the postcards in their packages that they were sending to people that are facing food insecurity. So this campaign, which is going on right now, is really focused on reaching the most vulnerable New Yorkers who oftentimes live in neighborhoods that are in dire need of funding. So there's 5.5 days left to complete the census. So if you haven't done it yet, again, now's the time. All right, I'm done with census now. So just talking about a few other partnerships to give you a sense of the other work that we do. I quickly wanted to touch on some fee-for-service work we've done with clients in the past year. As I mentioned before, any revenue we generate through our paid services goes directly into subsidized advertising solutions for the neediest nonprofits in New York. And this is a creative campaign we produced with the Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities that they love so much that they actually asked us to submit it for an award. We didn't have the time to do that, but we were excited that they were interested. And we actually made the content pretty evergreen. And because the city has seen a lot of budget cuts since the pandemic, they are actually going to recycle this content for this year's campaign for National Disability Employment Awareness Month as well. So the goal of this campaign was really to turn stereotypes about people with disabilities on their head and encourage employers to think twice before dismissing a candidate with a disability. And the campaign concept was fairly simple. Hire someone with a disability, it's just good business. And it featured authentic portraits and stories of real New Yorkers in recognizable businesses, including Uniqlo and TWA and the Frick, thriving in the workplace. So the subheadings here were great employees, fill in the blank, and you can see we did inspire loyalty, reduce turnover, are detail-oriented, and we really wanted to show that hiring for diverse abilities actually improves workplace culture and can help your bottom line. So we were able to work with the mayor's office at a price point that worked for them, and without sacrificing quality by working with some amazingly talented students in our artist collective. And while many people often dismiss students, young creatives come from all over the world to kind of perfect their craft in New York. And we were able to work with two phenomenal artists who were looking to build their portfolios and gain real world experience. So we did this campaign on a very small budget. And they were also so proud to see their work displayed in New York City's bus shelters. So I see Jen, so I have a feeling it's time's up. So I'm gonna skip over this one, but this is about media.
I think you can briefly chat about it. I just want to make sure people drop their questions. We might not have time for questions, but if you want to, I'd love for people to hear about this. So go ahead.
This campaign. Okay. So this was one of our media buying examples. So as I mentioned before, we also offer media buying that enables nonprofits to take advantage of very low rates on premium inventory. And this campaign was in partnership with Open Society Foundations and the SOZE agency. And we acted as the paid media buyer. And the goal of the campaign was to raise awareness, generate buzz and drive traffic to their sex workers pop-up exhibit, which was a week-long event which featured art and authentic stories of sex worker activists who are demanding decriminalization of the sex worker industry and labor protections. And you can see some of the art that was at the exhibit on the right, and then some of the ads we helped the Open Society purchase. So we put together a strategic and diverse media mix that included bus shelters and in-subway ads and Times Square billboards, as well as our own homegrown network. But in addition to like a traditional media buyer's campaign or work, the real value we added was that we provided, we helped Open Society Foundations frame their advocacy campaign in a way that wouldn't set off any alarms of our media partners. So you may not know this, but large out-of-home media companies, at least in New York, who manage the subway advertising and the bus shelter advertising, are not allowed to display advocacy messages. And we understand there's good reason for that. But we were able to help Open Society Foundations kind of frame their campaign as an artistic event, which it was. And we kept they kept the creative, the SOZE agency, very bare. So it raised curiosity and interest. And I think without that strategic insight into how the out-of-home market works, they wouldn't have been able to access prime inventory like in subway ad space. So the impact was large, 12 million impressions. We were able to help increase attendance by about 75% when you include the social media follows that occurred because people were posting images of the ads. Unfortunately, the pop-up had to close early because of COVID, but based on the attendance rates during the first few days, they extrapolated that 10,000 visitors would have come and learned more about how the lack of rights and the criminalization of sex work impacts a legitimate workforce that deserves equal protection under the law. And that's all I got. I have a few questions to leave you with. You don't have to answer them now, but I just wanted to reiterate that we're building this media cooperative. We're looking for new partners. Everybody has something that they can provide in this effort to democratize advertising. So we're dependent on each other, and we can leverage each other's resources and strengths instead of, handing over a lot of money to for-profit media companies. So yeah, so that's all I got.
Is that all? Is that all you do? No,
That's
it. Thank you so much, Nina. I didn't see any questions come in, but I'll certainly send you any that do. Hold on.
Okay.
Love this campaign, so empowering. Do you provide space for video messages, not just print? I think you just do static messaging, is that right?
We can do video messages, actually. Not all of our screens are formatted that way since we've been around since 2005, but I would say about 75% can do videos, but we do keep them to 15 seconds.
Awesome. I just love I love the census campaigns you worked on. They're really unique, and I've seen them pop up elsewhere, before even chatting with you. So it was cool to learn that you guys are behind them.
Awesome.
Well, thank you for sharing. I think
thank you, Jen.
We're gonna head on over to our last presentation. So Penny and Michelle, I don't know if you want to say a few words, come off of mute so we can see you.
Sure. Can everyone hear me? I want to say, first of all, I want to say thank you for having Michelle and I today, but seriously, Oscar, we're following Oscar the Grouch and fortune cookies. I feel a little inadequate just right off the bat here, but
no. you. So everyone, we're chatting with Penny Bolden and Michelle Hall. Penny Bolden is the Senior Director of Cause Partnerships for Blue Star Families, which works to support families of active military and veterans. And she has worked on a really amazing partnership with Macy's and grown from, I think, tens of thousands of dollar donation to now a 7-digit, not just 6-digit, but 7-digit donation. And so both of them are here to chat about their sort of recipe for success and what's made this such a robust partnership over the years. So welcome, Michelle. I don't know if I've seen Michelle yet, so I don't know if
Hi, yeah, thank you so much for having us. Hi, Penny, good to see you again.
Hi. I'll let you two take it over. Thank you for being here.
Wonderful, thank you. Well, I just want to start out after listening to Maureen earlier. You know, we are an 11-year-old organization, and we've really only focused on cause marketing activations for the past 3 to 5 years. So I've just marked my calendar for 2040, and I hope to come back and talk about our 30-year relationship that we have with Macy's. So, all right, so I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully that works. You guys see that?
Yep, looks great.
A little bit about Blue Star Families, for those of you who don't know us. We help Americans better support their military neighbors, because we know that our nation's strongest when those that protect us and their families are thriving. This is an all-volunteer force in this country, and so our service members need the rest of us, the rest of the country, to help support and uphold their families so that they can continue doing their job. We know Americans want to help. Blue Star Families provides that connection so that they can help where it's needed.
And Macy's is America's department store. Creating and celebrating community is really in our DNA. We celebrate together during special occasions and show up during times of need. And at our core, we commit to giving back.
Great. So any good partnership, I think we've talked about these a lot the last couple of days, but any good partnership, as we know, should bring out the best in both parties. You want your best man at your wedding to, during his speech, to be saying, these two complement each other. And that applies for cause partners too. Like all relationships, the two parties need to determine their common goals. At Blue Star Families, we're all about creating community for service members and their families. If that's not also core to our partner's mission, then creating the narrative for the campaign just becomes a constant battle. As you can see with the equation on the left-hand side of the screen, Macy's and Blue Star Families share the same goal of building strong community, but we believe that by working together, we can create stronger communities. I once worked with a very well-intentioned brand who ultimately wanted to focus on veteran homelessness, which is a great and worthy cause, but not one that Blue Star Families serves. So as we attempted to create the campaign narrative together, it became alarmingly clear that we were just not on the same page. Neither of us had taken the time to really get to know each other before we jumped all in on the campaign. And it was that fundamental lack of understanding that resulted in us breaking up after that first time working together. It was a conscious uncoupling that gratefully left no bitterness between our two brands, just regret, because we didn't choose each other for the right reasons. And as a nonprofit, it's really hard when someone says, hey, I want to help you to respond with a no. But also as a nonprofit, we can't afford to allocate resources to anything that won't provide that maximum ROI. So it's best to just say, thanks, that's very flattering. I can't date you right now, but I do have this friend over here, however, in this other organization, and they create this incredible impact in the homeless veteran community, and I'd love to introduce you. And playing matchmaker is great karma, because I recently received a call from our friends at Bunker Labs with this very kind of introduction, and it'll likely land Blue Star Families a prominent new brand partner in 2021. But just like any other relationship, commitment is also core, and both parties need to be equally committed. I won't lie, as the nonprofit, sometimes I feel like the needy one in the relationship. But if both parties don't come to the table with equal amounts of commitment, you're leaving potential on the table, and doing half a campaign is not what either party should be striving for.
And I'll jump in. Macy's and Blue Star Families have the same exact value. You can see it on the page. It's all about creating that strong community. And this is something we look for in every partner that we bring in. We need to have the local footprint in the communities that we live and work, and we need to have the impact in those same communities. I think another great part about Blue Star Families of Macy's is that we also have our iconic stars.
Purely coincidental. So all that's to say, just do a little dating before you propose, get to know each other because that investment pays off in spades in the future. And needless to say, our first date with Macy's went well, as did the second and the third, which is why we're here to talk to you today.
So Macy's has had a really long-term commitment to service members, veterans, and their families. Since we began, our stores and our regions have supported this through corporate grants, through employee giving, volunteerism. And how we decide to bring charity partners to a national platform is that we see a trend among most of our stores, and we have our colleagues telling us that it's something really important to them. And when we hear that across all of the different regions, we bring things to the national level. And that's what we did in 2013 with this specific cause. So since 2013, we've raised more than $13 million for America's veterans and military families. And this cause is really near and dear to our hearts because our colleagues are at the center of our business, and our colleagues are military members, military family members, and veterans themselves.
So what were our individual goals and how did we work together with Macy's to achieve them? For Blue Star Families, there's 3 components I look for in a cause partner, the 3 M's I call them. Ideally, I'll find all 3, although each partner is going to bring a different degree of each of these. So first of all, marketing. There's no better endorsement for our brand than to be aligned with a well-known, trusted, credible brand like Macy's for some very obvious reasons, but for Blue Star Families, it also has a direct impact on our mission. Our annual survey data tells us that the vast majority of military families don't feel that the rest of America recognizes or acknowledges the sacrifices the family members make. So being able to demonstrate to them that a brand like Macy's sees them and hears them and is stepping up to support them is very reassuring to them. And that actually helps us move the needle on that data point. And then the obvious one is we can't afford to pay for this kind of reach in advertising and awareness building. So for every customer who's asked, would you like to round up for Blue Star Families? You know, regardless of whether they end up donating or not, is a huge win for us. Not to mention the exposure our brand gets on in-store signage, on billboards and in direct mail pieces. The second M, all about member engagement, because at our core, Blue Star Families is a membership-based organization, and therefore we need to regularly engage our members, even if they don't need any of the programming or the resources today. We want them to stay connected to us for when they do need it. So where we can, we utilize incentives in our campaigns like sweepstakes to provide ongoing opportunities for our members to stay connected. And something as simple as a gift card giveaway can be really effective in achieving that. And last but not least is money. Unabashedly, I work for a nonprofit and we just simply can't do the work we do without the funding. So yes, there needs to be a funding component to the campaign.
And for Macy's, our goals are also threefold. We need to make sure that we are being relevant to our customers in the community and also what's going on in the world. We need to make sure that our customers and our colleagues are engaged in the campaigns themselves. And then we need to raise funding that creates some meaningful impact for our charity partners. So the Macy's Salutes Those Who Serve campaign invites customers to round up their purchases and donate their change to Blue Star Families and to Bunker Labs, who is our other partner for this campaign. And for us to consider any campaign to be successful, we need to make sure we're having a 360 activation. And this could be the same for a lot of our partners, but there are always things that make partnerships unique. So for this, we have storytelling, engagement, volunteer opportunities. In this case, the 4th of July fireworks, and then impact. So storytelling is really integral into making sure that we're humanizing any campaign that we have. And Macy's knows the importance of giving our charity partners the platform to tell their stories versus us trying to tell that story for them. So how we did it for this campaign is we actually highlighted a real Blue Star family in our marketing, along with 3 veterans from Bunker Labs. And they were featured across all of our different assets. This was through video, our site lit, any media purposes, but just allowed them to tell their story and how the charity partners themselves really changed their lives. We also partnered with Boost Our Families to invite 9 influencers from the military and veteran communities to our stores to meet with our colleagues who are also in the military communities. And they interviewed them, understood their stories, and then used those stories to make that connection between why Macy's was really supporting this cause, and invited the communities in to then donate to the cause itself. We also highlighted our colleagues in our internal communications vehicles, and you can see it right on this page, just a handful of the stories that we were able to tell throughout July. And it was incredible, the engagement that we saw from our other colleagues. They rallied around these colleagues, thanking them for their service, but also telling personal stories about how these people have impacted their lives. So seeing how much engagement that was around this was just really reassuring, and knowing that we were supporting the right things. And then I did want to just highlight one story that we absolutely love to tell, that one of the influencers from Boost Our Families was able to write about in an article. But we have a colleague down in Louisiana, her name is Margaret Long, and she is a store manager, and she is a military wife. As Penny has told us, military families move a lot during their careers, and Margaret was no exception to this. She moved a ton, but wanted to maintain her career and her commitment to her family. The most beautiful thing is that our Macy's colleagues around the country rallied around her, and wherever she moved, we found a job for her in a store or in a district office, wherever that was. And not only just a job, but something that she could have a career in and constantly be moving up versus moving down into store. So she really is the star of our campaign every year, and she is just an incredible person to show the authenticity of how Macy's is supporting this internally as well as externally.
So it's all about engagement, and we do this with several activations. With our Boost Our Families volunteers, we deploy them to more than 75 stores across the country to present to Macy's colleagues at staff meetings during the first few days of the campaign. Often we send them with a box of donuts because we know bribery is everything. But they're sporting co-branded t-shirts, so they have both the Blue Star Families logo and the Macy's logo on them. They're typically military spouses, or they have some type of a military connection, and they provide Macy's colleagues with a personal overview of the challenges of the military family lifestyle. And they're able to articulate how Macy's support has been a game changer for their community. They make those very real, very human connections with the Macy's colleagues, who often, as Michelle said, a lot of them have a military connection themselves. So they're often sharing their own military connected stories with the volunteer. For us, this is an integral component of the campaign. I know Maureen talked about how important this was earlier. It's something that's worked really well for our other cause partners as well. Macy's colleagues are literally the ones out there in the room where it happens. So they're on the front lines, they're potentially walking the customer through the roundup process. It's really, really important that the Macy's colleagues understand the why and the who and the how, because they could be the difference between a customer choosing, yes, I'll round up today, or no, I'll skip that because I don't know who the heck Blue Star Families is or what they do. And then we also, as I mentioned earlier, we engage our Blue Star family members. I already talked about the survey revealed the fact that the rest of the military families feel that the rest of America doesn't understand or acknowledge the sacrifices the family members make. So as a military family, when you open a direct mail flyer and you see the Blue Star Families logo on it, that goes a long way to reassuring them that a major brand like Macy's sees them and supports them. So we do, Nina, we do want to shout this from the rooftops. So we elevate that message internally with our members in newsletters on social, and we use those incentives. And those little nuances, those incentive nuances go a long way to helping us tell a story to what we consider our most important audience, the people we serve, our military families.
And Macy's also recognized their own veterans and military families with custom ribbons that identified them as military family members or military veterans. And this allowed not only our colleagues to honor them, but our customers to go into our stores and to thank these colleagues for their service. We also drove excitement with colleagues by sending them selfie frames, because who doesn't love to take a selfie? And we encourage them to post these pictures to our internal site called Yammer. If you're not familiar, it's kind of like a Facebook site where you can interact in the same way. And we set a challenge where the top 10 submissions from every region won money for their, what we call Food, Fun, and Flowers account, which is really an account that allows them to use the dollars to celebrate the store community with little parties, pizza parties, just ways to make sure that we're making sure the colleagues feel celebrated.
All right. As we mentioned on the previous slide, it's very important to us to connect the Macy's colleagues directly to the cause. And just one more way we do that is by finding ways that they can get personally involved in creating the impact for the military families. And last year in 2019, that connection was making welcome kits. Military families move every 1, 2, or 3 years, and every time they move with each new home, there are a lot of extra costs. The number of shower curtains or bath mats or storage options changes with each house you move into. It's also challenging to feel like you're part of the local community every time you move, when you always feel like you're new and temporary. So these are known hot buttons for our military families, and we know we can address them with a simple gesture of welcome. Not just welcome, but welcome, and we understand how frustrating it must be. So here's to say, we see you. We want to help you make this latest house feel more like a home. And in addition, we welcome you to our community. It means a heck of a lot to take that extra step and do something that's real and that really resonates with the folks you're serving. And here's what happens when we do that. The store managers and the employees get that firsthand experience, and it energizes them for our mission. And then they get enthusiastic all on their own outside of the campaign, and they start finding ways that they can continue to work with our local volunteers and do even more year round. And that's why we call it creating community.
So we align this campaign every year to July to make sure that we're aligning with our celebration of our country. As many may know, every July Macy's hosts the 4th of July fireworks show. So to make sure that we were also honoring this partnership during that time, even though it's a little bit outside of this, this event itself, we invited our charity partners to have representatives at the New York Stock Exchange closing bell on July 3rd. So this is something that we participate in every single year to celebrate the 4th of July fireworks. We also invited military families from each branch of the military to be on site at the actual show, and we panned to them at multiple times during the broadcast. We also had the video for the campaign playing at the actual event, and every person that attended received these gift bundles that had, as you can see on this page, these little cards within them of the campaign artwork that showed the real military families and veterans with the call to action to join us in donating.
Impact, we've heard this word already today, impact and outcomes. The Macy's funding has been allocated to provide paid staff and programming resources on the ground in 6 locations across the country, which is incredible because those 6 chapters reach at least 60,000 military family members every year and ultimately provide about $45 million in benefits to our members. Michelle and the team have told me that this is, understanding impact is one of the most important things that we do. Understanding the true impact of the campaign that the impact makes in our community allows Macy's to continue doing what they do. So we invest, as Maureen alluded to earlier, we invest a lot of time and effort into communicating that impact back to Macy's. And communicating impact back to Macy's doesn't just mean, simply sending a thank you for the funding letter. We dive into the impact. We dive very, very deep into it, and we let them know. We provide them stories, very personal stories of the human beings that they've helped and what it meant to them to receive that help from Macy's and their employees. So the report does, our impact reports don't just include sort of social and media reach was this, which is also great, but at the end of the day, they really want to know what the work that they did, how that helped change our world. And just like we think it's important to include the colleagues, the Macy's colleagues into our engagement opportunities, we like to circle back to them after we've come out and we've spoken to them at the staff meetings, they've produced those welcome kits. We sort of want to return back to them and report that impact back to them, let them know how much that support meant to our families. So we're not just producing or reporting back to the CSR team, to Michelle and her team who are in headquarters, New York City. We're producing little vignettes like this so that they can share them with the teams that showed up out there on the front lines. And as a nonprofit, we don't have a massive advertising or video production team, but these are some of the simple things you can do to share with them to let them know how much we appreciated what they did. So again, it's just a really effective but cost-effective way of humanizing and personalizing our thank you messages back to the colleagues themselves. It's very, very personal. Just talk is my motto. Constant communication, not just between Michelle and I, but between our chapter directors and volunteers with the store managers. I think sometimes as nonprofits, we assume that everyone already understands our need. And sometimes we don't know what the partner is capable of supporting. It was in a conversation with the Macy's team about that extra cost of buying all those little things after moving and the repetitive challenge of feeling like you're not part of that new community every time you move, that they said, hey, we can actually help with that. And that's how the welcome bag idea was born. So keep the dialogue going, even outside of the campaign period, and on as many staffing and location levels as possible to keep the conversations deep and broad across both organizations. In person when possible, because we're only human. Long distance relationships are much harder than in-person ones. And I'm a military spouse and half my marriage has been long distance, so I can attest to that. But although COVID makes it so much harder, find creative ways to get together as many times as possible. And for us, don't limit, we try not to limit our connections just to the campaign and planning periods. We find ways to incorporate partners in all of our events, other opportunities. We've invited Macy's leadership to present on panels alongside us, to co-host podcasts with us, to attend our galas, and to co-present at the Cause Marketing Summit.
Then I think for us, it's also all about localizing the national campaigns, and that's done through the direct local impact, but also through those relationships between the stores and the communities versus just having a relationship, like Penny mentioned, at this national level. So that allows us to really extend the opportunities to be more evergreen versus just happening during one time during the year. We hear all the time that our stores are working with Boost Our Communities way throughout the year. So for us, that means that this tactic is working and that it's meaningful. Especially during a pandemic. So everybody knows that 2020 was an incredibly difficult year. Macy's closed all of our stores on March 17th due to the pandemic. And because of that, a lot of things that we had planned on doing were not able to happen. So when we were talking to Penny and Boost Our Families, they were just incredibly understanding of the difficulties that we were facing and that everyone was facing at this time. So Although we were not able to move forward with the campaign as we would have liked to this year, we were really thrilled to be able to present them with a corporate grant this year when our stores did reopen. But we're so thankful to Penny and her team that we have this relationship that will last beyond this really tough year.
That's all we got.
And that's all.
Come on, you got it. No, I'm just kidding. That's really amazing. Thank you both for sharing and being so open and honest to kind of what works and what doesn't and what's made it so very successful. Obviously, having Macy's so involved, and their people who work in the store on the ground and who are veterans, and maybe their colleagues don't know that until this campaign came out. I think that's really, really cool. So, for lack of a better word, I think really impactful is really the word I'm looking for. But we did have a couple questions that did come in. Did you encounter any challenges as a result of unexpected, or did you get any negative feedback for the campaign? I guess that question is more for Macy's.
No, I think that, this cause is something we've been supporting since Macy's existed. So I think because of that, it made it really authentic when we did go to engage with Blue Star Families and Bunker Labs a few years ago. So I don't think that there's been any negative feedback. I know that our colleagues every year look forward to this campaign, and those military, veteran, and family ribbons become something that have been requested for the colleagues to wear year round because they're just so proud. So I think that can just show that when you pick the right partners and you pick the right causes, you don't have to worry about negative backlash, especially when you have such a long-standing commitment to that cause.
Absolutely. Okay, does anyone else have any questions? I think we have time for maybe one more. If anyone would like to ask anything. There's a lot of good, happy comments. People like that you incorporated Blue Star Family into the Macy's collateral. I thought that was really impressive that you were able to put that out to all the firework attendees, and I was really impressed by that for sure. Great. Well, I think I'm just going to say thank you then, and thank you for sharing. Thank you for being open and honest. I think this is one example of a partnership that wasn't, able to completely pivot, but you pivoted, and like many partnerships, you have to sometimes take a campaign pause. I think obviously Macy's was affected deeply by the pandemic and your bottom line and how you operate. And so not every corporate partner can continue with the campaign, especially something with so many prongs and so much, high touch kind of activation happening. So I commend you for keeping it alive and obviously continuing to support in years to come. So thank you so much.
The good news is we're almost ready to launch for next year.
True. Almost in planning mode for 2021.
Well done.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing. Next, one thing we do at every Cause Marketing Summit is we award a very important person the Awesome Possum Award. So I'm going to say a little bit about the award itself, and then I am going to show a little bit of a video for you. It's a Cause Marketing success story that was submitted to us from Soaring Words, from Lisa Buxbaum, who you've seen, I'm sure, on Lisa Honig's Buxbaum from Soaring Words. So I'm going to share the video first, and then tell you who's won our Awesome Possum Award, which goes to not, whoever's raised the most millions or billions of dollars in the cause marketing world, but rather goes to someone who does something really meaningful in the community, who often, can go unnoticed or unawarded. So I'm going to share this video with you quickly here.
Hi, I'm Lisa Honig-Buxbaum, CEO and founder of Soaring Words. Soaring Words' mission is to inspire ill children, families, adults, and healthcare professionals to take active roles in self-healing. I started the organization after 3 experiences with death and illness that happened in my family in a 10-month period. Over the past 20 years, we've inspired more than 500,000 children and adults and caregivers to take active roles in their self-healing, using Soaring into Strength workshops that teach people the latest science to take an active role to increase their mental, physical, and emotional well-being. The Cause Marketing Summit changed the life of my organization. I sat next to Stacy Flanagan, the director of the Jersey City Department of Health and Human Services. When you sit next to someone for 8 hours during a conference, you kind of really get to know them. We talked about all the great speakers and the topics, and I also got to meet several of her directors of the Department of Health and Human Services. By the end of the day, Director Flanagan had hired me and Soaring Words to do some high-level workshops for her staff at the Department of Health and Human Services. For the past year and a half, I've had the honor and privilege to work closely with Stacy, to Paul Bellenboyer, Linda Ivory Green, and their top lieutenants. I have to tell you, these people are so committed and so heroic and so capable. They serve with such empathy and compassion and real diligence. Over the past year and a half, I've had the pleasure and honor of leading many Soaring into Strength workshops on resilience, growth mindset, meaning and purpose, gratitude, and character strengths, and dozens more. And then in December, there was the terror attack. And I got a call from Stacy saying that the mayor and the Department of Health and Human Services wanted me to lead workshops for the different faith-based leaders and the leaders of the hundreds of not-for-profit organizations throughout Jersey City. So we sprang into action and we started leading more workshops, confidential workshops where people from different walks of life could come together and share and process the trauma that happened. Jersey City is an exceptional place, and the World Economic Forum chose it to be the launch city for their Healthy Cities initiative. Soaring Words has worked really closely with Stacy and her team to provide dozens of workshops that will provide mental health and emotional support for the thousands of residents throughout Jersey City. I've been so honored and inspired to work closely with Stacy and her team as they serve the 270,000 residents of Jersey City. I'm so happy for the Cause Marketing Summit for bringing me together with this wonderful organization, and I salute you on all the things that you've accomplished. Thank you, and congratulations, Stacy.
All right, thank you so much for that, Lisa. Obviously, you can tell who might be winning the Awesome Possum Award. I just want to say a few words about Stacy Flanagan. And she is just the quintessential service. She gives back in droves, and she was the first person that I worked with, or worked for, I should say, in the nonprofit world. And I've learned so much from her. She is the director of Health and Human Services in Jersey City. And admittedly, I haven't been able to chat with her because she's been so busy responding to COVID and still doing all the meaningful work that she does. And I can attest that if she is sitting next to you at a conference, she'll not only think about how she can help you and help you further your mission, but also how her vast network can help you further your mission. So I just like to give the Awesome Possum Award to Stacy Flanagan. I don't know, Stacy, if you'd like to say a few words, that'd be wonderful.
So I have like someone knocking on my door right now because the work is never done. Thank you, Jen. This is, an honor. I think for many people on this conference know that I have, obviously been working with Jen for the last 10 years, a little more. And I believe so much in cause marketing. And earlier today, I was listening to one of the speakers talk about the value added in the partnerships. And I was like, I wonder if you read Collaboration Matters, a book I worked on when I was with the Drucker Foundation, you know, over 15 years ago. But it still is really relevant today. And I think, Jennifer, you've done an amazing job. And I'm so proud of you. And doing this great work and bringing all these really wonderful people together. And so I'm honored to be one of your awesome possums. And I think, you know, the last few days have been really a wonderful experience for not only myself, but my staff. They're all texting me and following up with me and telling me how excited to get out of, you know, 6 months of COVID. A lot of people that are actually on the call from my team have been working, you know, nonstop since March 6th. And when I say nonstop, I mean weekends, nights, anytime the phone rings. So this was a good way for them to get re-inspired and think in a different way about partnership. And I'm really honored to be here today. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Stacy. I think one thing that Stacy really, I don't know if you even remember doing this, but I had you look at the agenda for the very first Cause Marketing Summit, and you took one look at it. I think it took you 5 seconds to say, you really need to think about diversity, putting these things together. And I think that was a wonderful piece of advice, and something that we've seen come through in every summit, and certainly is no doubt due in part to you. So really appreciate your guidance, your advice, and hopefully we can break bread and have drinks soon. But thank you for all the work that you do, being on the front lines. I'm amazed. All right. Thank you. But I really appreciate everyone coming and sharing with us. I was not sure how this would play in the virtual world, and I'm really thrilled that we had so many attendees and people who stayed for the duration of the summit. So thank you so much for being here and for dedicating the time during this time when we're so busy and occupied with other things. So welcome to the tribe, everyone. You're in the fold, and I have my crew coming in here. See.
It was a great conference, Jen. Fantastic. You should feel really proud.
These are my two little partnership helpers.
Oh, they're so cute.
This is
those are the twins. All right.
Say hi. You can. Thank you. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much, and thanks for sticking around till the end. But you want to wave? Say bye-bye, Cause Marketing people. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Till next.
Bye-bye. Thanks again.
Everyone sending you love. Thank you.
All right.